Welcome to the MyLawCLE presentation. During today's presentation, you may access the course materials from the handout section located on your screen. Attendees seeking credit for this presentation, pay careful attention to the screen. A pop-up box will be displayed at various times during the presentation. You will need to click Confirm on the pop-up each time it appears to qualify for CLE credit. In order to receive CLE credit, you must also click on the link that will appear at the end of this presentation to initiate the certificate process.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation here, Podcasting for Lawyers, Strategies and Practical Steps. I want to thank MyLawCLE for hosting this presentation and thank all the attendees for joining. Brief introduction about myself. My name is Jonathan Spencer. I am a licensed attorney in the state of Michigan. But for the last 15 years, I have been doing legal marketing and business development. 12 years was in-house at a big firm in Southeast Michigan, primarily in Detroit. In the last 3 years, in more of a consulting role. I help people with all marketing and business development, but really my sweet spot is technology. That includes websites and email marketing, CRM, etc., and more recently, podcasting and video. I am the producer of our company Rain BDM's podcast, Sticky Lawyers. So if you're interested in seeing some of my work, check out Sticky Lawyers. It's a podcast about attorneys who do interesting things in their practice. Now, our company Rain BDM is a firm that helps law firms of all sizes do marketing and business development, everything from business development strategy to marketing, planning, coaching, technology, etc. So enough about me. The conversation today is about podcasting, and this is kind of the roadmap of what I want to discuss. I'm going to start a little bit about how podcasting works, and we're to start with the benefits of podcasting, and then spend most of my time talking about how podcasting works, almost step by step from concept to distribution and syndication. Initially podcasting, I just looked this up, it started 20 years ago. The first podcast was released, and originally it was a very complicated process. It required a lot of expensive equipment, a lot of technology know-how, but since then that learning curve has flattened. Technology and equipment has gotten significantly less expensive and more intuitive, so more people can get into the podcasting business. So again, I'm going to cover what is podcasting and then how you do podcasting. So why podcast? Now, with your practice, you have lots of different marketing tools in your marketing toolbox. You can write content, articles, blog posts. You can speak or present. You can do advertising, and really podcasting, I feel, takes kind of the best of each one of those marketing categories. First off is reach. A podcast, when you record it and syndicate it and send it out, you're reaching a really wide audience, or the potential to reach a really wide audience. It's going out there not only on your firm's website, but out to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, etc. So much greater reach. Much like writing and presenting, you can also use podcasts to build your authority and trust. And what do I mean by that? I mean, show yourself to be a thought leader in your given topic. Just like writing an article on a aspect of the law, you can do the same thing with a podcast. Show your audience that you know what you're talking about, right? And finally, probably the most important element that sets podcasting apart from other marketing tools is the ability to humanize your brand. And what I mean by that is podcasting, much like presenting, you are creating a relationship with your audience. They're listening to you speak, they're seeing you if it's on video, and they're getting to know you through your recording, through your podcast. An example would be if a potential client was recommended, or you were recommended to a potential client. They go on Google, they search for you, they see you have a podcast, they listen to it, and they say, this guy really knows his stuff. He seems like a good person, the way he interacts with people on his podcast, I'm going to reach out and talk to them. Great way to humanize yourself. And when you meet that person in person, in real life, not just over the podcast, it's almost like they're meeting you for a second time. It's a lot more comfortable when you have that first conversation with them. So increased reach for your content, building that authority and trust through thought leadership, and most importantly, humanizing your brand. Now, the nitty-gritty of how to do a podcast. I break podcasts down into really three categories. So when you're thinking about embarking on the podcast journey, consider what sort of format you want to do. I've broken into three categories: short form, which is a podcast or video that's less than 5 minutes; a longer form, which is generally 15 minutes to an hour; and interview style, where you're talking with somebody else. So a short form podcast, super quick, easy to edit, very convenient, doesn't take a lot of time to record. Those are the benefits of doing a short form, but obviously the cons of doing a short form podcast: very shallow. You can't get really in depth into a topic, kind of superficially covering it, just giving an overview. If, for example, you wanted to do a short form podcast about recent developments in the law, that's another thing you have to consider. You have to be sure you stay on top of those recent developments in the law. If a new regulation comes out and you don't talk about it in your podcast for 2 months from now, that information is stale, right? So that sort of cadence, you have to stay on top of it. Now, a longer form, obviously, you can get way more in depth into your topic. Really dive down into the subject matter, really show off your thought leadership and your expertise. But the downside of long form, obviously, is attention and engagement. Everyone's busy, everyone's got a lot going on. Sometimes it can be hard to keep people engaged if you're talking for a long period of time. Now, an interview style is my favorite style of podcasting. It can be short, but generally interview formats are longer form, and it's a conversation with you and somebody else. It doesn't have to be an outside of your firm guest. It could be somebody inside of your firm. It could be your partner or an associate. Just having an engagement with somebody else talking on the subject matter. The pros of interview style format is it's way more engaging for the audience. The audience will be a part of your conversation. You're not just talking directly to them. That banter back and forth between you and your guest is way more engaging. And the other benefit of it is if you have a guest from an outside, a client, a potential client, or someone in the business community as your guest, you can expand the reach for your podcast. And I'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to growth and distribution. Now, the downside of doing interview style is it's really the scheduling. You're busy. Your potential guests are busy, and finding that time with everyone's scheduled to work to set aside to do a recording, that can be hard. But that's kind of the downside. So short form, less than 5 minutes. Long form, less than an hour interview with somebody else. So why don't, while I go through this, I'll use a hypothetical. Let's say I'm an estate planning attorney and I want to start a podcast. All right, and I'll kind of use this example going through. And I decide I want to go ahead and do an interview style podcast. The next thing to consider is whether you want to do an audio only or a video only podcast. Now, audio only, as you can imagine, is audio only. You don't have to worry about lighting. You don't have to worry about crazy things going on in the background, that sort of thing. The other benefit of doing audio only is it's very easy to edit. When you do a video style and you're cutting up the content and moving things around, you can have very jerky video as you do the editing. Not a deal breaker, but not super aesthetically pleasing. If you go video, it's way more engaging. Obviously, you're seeing somebody talk, seeing them interact with the camera, with their guest. It's much easier to pull clips for social media. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And if you record video, it doesn't mean you can't pull the audio track from that video and distribute it as audio as well. So you're kind of getting everything if you do the video style to begin with from the jump. Once you decide what format you want to use or to have for your podcast, the most critical thing to consider is how you're going to be doing the recording. Again, I've broken it down into 3 categories. In a studio, DIY, and kind of a hybrid method. Okay, so there are resources out there, dedicated studios for recording podcasts. They're going to be super high quality. They're going to have the great sound rooms with the sound deadening stuff all around you, with awesome tech, a tech person on hand to help you, so you can just roll in with your outline, put the headphones on, get in front of the mic, and get recording. Super easy, super easy. I was going to say convenient, but it's really not. The cons of doing it in a studio is it's not as convenient, right? You have to schedule and book a time, and that can be really complicated, especially if you're doing an interview style podcast. If you think it's hard to coordinate your schedule with your guest schedule, adding a third group in there of the recording studio makes it even harder. And it's also expensive. You're paying for that studio time, you're paying for that tech. If you're having the studio do the editing for you, you're paying for that as well. So it's something to balance. Now, the other end of the spectrum is the DIY approach, the do-it-yourself approach. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the cost of equipment has gone way down from where it was even 5 years ago. So it's definitely feasible for you just to buy some equipment and have it there, either in your office or at your home, wherever you plan on doing recording. And that leads to the convenience, which is probably the best part of DIY. If you're doing it yourself, you don't have to rely on booking a space to do your recording. If you're in your office and you've got a lull, or you're home on the weekend and inspiration hits you, you can drop in front of your camera and your mic, put your headphones on, and record whenever you want to. The downside of it is, of course, you are tech support. You are the one making sure everything's working. You're making sure that the editing's work. You're making sure the tech is working. It's going to be on you to do the editing, the distribution, everything. So you got to balance that. The convenience of doing it yourself versus hiring it out for someone else to do it. And that's where hybrid comes in. And this is how I help people with podcasting, is this hybrid method. Generally, the way it works is we pick how comfortable the client is with their DIY approach. Are they good with their tech? Are they good with their recording? Then they can just send me the audio file and I can do the post-production distribution for them. Do they need a little bit more help with the recording, with helping them with topics? I can help with that. So it's kind of a sliding scale about how much help you need. It's more convenient than booking a studio because you're not going physically into a location to record. You can farm out the editing to whoever's going to be doing the editing for you, but there will be some costs associated with that. So studio, DIY, and hybrid, 3 options. So let's say our hypothetical podcaster here, our estate planning lawyer for Estate Planning 101, wants to do it himself or herself themselves. What tech do they actually need to get this thing off the ground? First and foremost, critical piece of equipment is a microphone. You need to have a dedicated microphone when you record your podcast. Using the microphone on your laptop is not going to cut it. It's not going to be good enough quality. The good news is an external microphone, just a USB plug into your computer record microphone, are not super expensive. You can get a good quality microphone for around a couple $100. Just stick with the name brand. You can buy all kinds of accessories that go with it too, like one of those arms that hooks onto your desk. You got the microphone in front of you with a windscreen. You can get really involved. Not necessarily, but kind of nice to have. So dedicated microphone. Secondly, you're going to need a set of headphones. They can be super high quality over-the-ear headphones, or you can even use earbuds. I just strongly suggest you don't do wireless. A wireless Bluetooth headset can work, but that's just another level of complexity or tech that you're adding that's really not necessary to your production. Now, why do you need headphones? One, hear how you sound. So when you're listening in the headphones, you're hearing how your recording is sounding, you're hearing how your guests are sounding, and you can adjust. If you sound really quiet, you can speak up. If you're too loud, you can pull it back a little bit. Equally as important is using headphones cuts down on echoing. If you have an external microphone and you're using computer speakers, you can get that feedback between you and the guests with your microphone. So using those, earbuds or headphones cut down on echoing. And the third thing that you need, it's kind of 3A and 3B, is software, applications. Applications to record your podcast and applications to edit your podcast. There are many options out there for those platforms. I'm going to talk a little bit about them in the next slides, but you don't need to break the bank. There are plenty of options out there. They're almost all subscription-based, but you can get access normally for free to test them out, and then maybe $20 a month to get a subscription to use the recording and editing tools. So I'm going to talk a little bit about recording platforms. If you are doing a solo talking head, just you speaking into the microphone podcast, no guests or anything, you can get away with the free recording software that comes with your PC or Apple product. I think it's Windows Sound Recorder or Apple GarageBand. It's there to record. It'll work just fine. As long as you have a good input, you can get a good quality audio file from that platform. However, if you are doing a podcast with multiple guests, more than just you, I strongly recommend investing in a multi-channel platform to record your podcast. Now, what is a multi-channel platform? Kind of is what it sounds like. It takes the recording from each guest and records them separately, and then when you're done, you put them together into one audio file. Now, the benefit of doing that is a couple of different things. One, when you get in post-production and start editing, if you have different channels for each speaker, it's way easier to adjust those audio levels and the balancing. If, for example, you're using Zoom to do the recording and you have multiple guests, Zoom puts it all together in one file when you record. So when you go to edit that, it's just one audio file. So if I want to bump up one of my guests, I have to manually make sure that one little section is up, and it's very complicated. A multi-channel platform will allow me to target that one channel and bump it up and then merge the audio files together, and you're good to go. The other real big benefit with a multi-channel, the platform we use, Squadcast, is that it records it locally where the person is speaking. This really helps if the person has kind of a bad connection with internet. I remember one of our episodes of our podcast, our guest had a really bad internet connection, and we were worried that the content was going to be no good because it sounded kind of bad on our end. But luckily, Squadcast recorded it locally on their device, and so when we uploaded into the cloud their audio recording, it sounded really good. It didn't have that sort of internet latency issue that we were experiencing on our end. So single speaker, just your standard recording software will work. If you're doing multiple guests, invest in a multi-channel platform. Along with that, you're going to need to get editing tools to edit your content. No one does a perfect podcast right out of the gate. And even if it was perfect, you're going to want to do some other things to it. You're going to want to add some music and things like that. Again, no need to get Adobe Premiere or something really high-end. You can use lots of platforms that are out there. iMovie with Apple's very good. The one that we use is called Descript, and that editing tool operates almost like a word processor. When you upload the audio file, it transcribes it into almost looks like a Word document, and then you can edit it just like a Word document to do your editing. Take this section, put it over here, take that section, cut it, paste over there. Very simple, very intuitive. Nothing like the way it used to be 5+ years ago. Much easier, but you're going to want an editing platform as well. And again, these are generally subscription-based. Everything's subscription-based. You can get a trial to test it out, and then spend $20 or so a month to have a prescription-free editing tool. So, technology, microphone, headset, recording tool, editing tool. Now that you have all your toys and you want to do your podcast, you need to package it. Just like any marketing, you have to come up with a package for your podcast. What is the theme of your podcast? Our estate planning attorney wants to do estate planning for family. Estate planning is going to be their podcast. Find a theme and stick with it. Make it consistent. If you switch themes, you're going to have to start a new podcast. That's just common sense. Think of a catchy title to get people's attention, and then consider all the branding that goes into it. You're going to want to do a logo for it. You're going to need to do graphics for it. Identify some music that you can use as intros and outros that will identify your podcast. All that sort of standard branding has to be done ahead of time. before you start, before you launch your podcast. Kind of common sense. Before you actually sit down and hit the record button, you have to do a lot of groundwork to make sure it's successful. You have your theme, say estate planning law is what our theme is going to be about. Then you have to consider your topics for your episodes. And it's always good to have a nice repository of topics ahead of time to sort of plan out your episodes in your distribution calendar. The way to identify topics is really not very different from identifying topics for writing articles or blog posts or speaking engagements. Stick with what you're interested in, what topics you think are hot. If you're not sure or you've hit writer's block for topics, this is something I recommend to all of our clients. Think about what your current clients or friends and family have been asking you in the last month about the law or about whatever your theme is for your podcast. If your client asks you a question, odds are there's lots of other folks out there who have that exact same question, and that will be a fantastic topic for your podcast. If you are doing an interview style podcast, take time to research your guests. Think about, I want to do a topic about, my estate planning attorney wants to do a topic about documents that a freshman will need when they go off to school in the fall. Maybe you have a guest on from the HR, from admissions from a college to come in and talk about what they've experienced. Research that guest ahead of time. Look at their bio, see if they've been a guest on another podcast, listen to them, see how they sound, but do that kind of legwork up ahead of time when you are researching your guests. Next, prepare an outline for your content. Even if it's just a short 5-minute update on the Corporate Transparency Act, have an outline. It'll keep you on track. It'll make sure you hit the points that you want to hit, but don't do a script. You don't want to just read to the screen. That's tough. Have an outline. It allows you to sound more natural. It's okay if you you want to reflect your personality and have that come through. So outline, don't do a script. Now backing up, we're talking about researching guests. If you're doing a guest or interview style podcast, one of the most critical things that you'll do or should do before you hit the record button is what we call, or I don't know if other people call it, a discovery call. Now, a discovery call takes care of a whole bunch of boxes before you do your recording session. First and foremost, is your guest really interested in being on your podcast? A lot of people say yes, then you start talking to them and they're distracted, disinterested. Ends up they really don't want to do this. It's great to take care of that in a discovery call. You're not wasting anyone's time. You can say thank you and stay in touch. Worst thing that happened is now you have another contact, someone else in your network that you can reach out to or they can reach out to you if something comes up. Also, a great benefit of doing a discovery call is I can't tell you how many times we've identified new topics that we hadn't considered talking about when we talked to the guest. We wanted to be talking about A and B, and they mentioned C, and C is super interesting. Incorporate that into the podcast. And just as importantly, it serves as a technology check. When you do that discovery call with your guest, you can see, if you're doing video, you can see how their surroundings look, listen to how they sound. Just make sure that you set it up to be the exact same environment where they will be when they actually do the recording. Make sure they're using the same computer, same microphone, same internet, everything. Take care of those bugs ahead of time. It'll save you time when it comes to the actual recording. All right, so you got your tech, you got your guests lined up, you got your software for recording, you're good to go. You hit record, you record your content. Fantastic. Now what do you do? Well, the first thing, the next step, obviously, in this is post-production. And this is kind of the more labor-intensive part of podcasting. It requires you, to balance audio levels, edit content, clip things, move things around. One of the things we do when we record our podcasts is when we're done, we ask the guest, is there anything you want to go back and answer again? Or is there anything that you think we should have asked that we didn't? And then you could take that segment and move it back up into the podcast. Highly recommend music. Music will be part of your brand for your podcast, be identifiable to go with your podcast. And last but definitely not least is if you're doing video, this is where you would put in captions. I'll talk a little bit about this with social media, but captions with your podcast are critical. Now, again, this is something you can do it yourself. You can farm this out to somebody else to help you with it, whatever makes sense for you and whatever your comfort levels are. I should have mentioned this part of post-production too is creating snippets for marketing your podcast. Now, as I say here, audio is great, but video gets engagement. If you did a video version of your podcast, it's easy to clip out like less than 1 minute chunks for sharing on social media or really anywhere. Kind of a teaser for your podcast, a greatest hits, a highlight. You clip it, pull it out, format it for social media. Get it in the right portrait style or portrait or square for Instagram, that sort of thing. Great for distribution. If you did an audio only podcast, still create some sort of visual animated graphic to go with your teaser clips. These are audiograms, and I'm sure you've seen them in your feeds. It's generally a graphic with a title, maybe a headshot of your guest, and the all-important captions going across the screen. This is what will get people's attention. Now, if you're like me and you're scrolling in social media, you've got your phone on mute. Just having a static image may not get someone to pause. But if you're coming across and you see captions coming across, you may pause and read the captions, and that can hook someone's attention to click on the podcast and listen to the episode, or even unmute their phone to hear it. So create some sort of visuals that will go with your podcast in post-production to help with distribution later on. I mentioned this back at the beginning, the all-important editorial calendar. Determining and establishing a cadence of distribution and a calendar for your podcast is just as important as the audio quality of your podcast. You want to make sure that when you commit to having a distribution of, I'm going to do one podcast a month, or I'm going to do one podcast every 2 weeks, make sure you stick to that, because once you start to build an audience and once they start to expect to have an episode dropping on Wednesday mornings, the second and fourth Wednesday of each month, if you miss that, that can hurt your audience. If you're scheduling individual episodes, I've got this up on here. Keep in mind seasonal topics. For example, our estate planning lawyer, if he's doing an episode on documents your college student needs to take with them to school, don't put that episode out in November, December. They're already there. Put it out when they're graduating from high school. Do it in June or July when parents are scrambling and trying to prepare to get their kids off to school. So keep that in mind when you're calendaring your episodes, especially if it's evergreen content, if it's not late-breaking news or something that really needs to get the word out immediately. The other thing, and again, I should have highlighted this and put arrows everywhere, create an episode cushion. And what do I mean by that is don't just record one podcast and then send it out. That puts a lot of pressure on you to get the next episode recorded and post-production and everything and get it out the door, and so you have a 2-week cadence. That's a lot of pressure to put on you at the very beginning when you're still figuring things out. It's a much better approach to have 5 or 6 episodes in the bag ready to go. So that way, launch date, release 1, kind of see how it's doing. 2 weeks in there, release the next episode, kind of see how it's doing. Then you can start fine-tuning things for when you start recording further on. Create that cushion to take the pressure off you. It also helps keep your podcast going when life happens. I mean, everybody gets busy, and work and family is going to come before your podcast. I mean, that's just how it works. But to keep that cadence going, if you've got enough in the queue, you can go through those lulls. Now, we have our podcast recorded. We have an idea of our release schedule and when we want to release them and what our cadence will be. How do we actually get it out there to the audience, to the potential audience? And that's where hosting and syndication comes in. Now, hosting is where is your podcast going to live, and syndication is how is the audience going to find it. Hosting, like everything else, has gotten a lot easier over the years. You can still get a plugin for a WordPress website, or you can get your IT folks involved on your website to actually host your podcast on your firm's website, but I don't recommend that. Find an all-in-one platform where you can host and distribute your podcast. They're very intuitive. They're not very expensive, but it'll allow a repository for your podcast. It will allow you to host and share graphics for your podcast, bios for your podcast, summaries of your content. It'll allow you to collect reviews and subscriptions, and get it out into the podcasting platforms, the Apple Podcasts, the Spotify's, etc. So highly recommend going with an all-in-one platform. And there are lots of options that are out there. Now that's pushing your content out, pushing your podcast out into the world. How do folks find your podcast? Now that comes back to SEO, really. Think of a good title for your episode. Be sure to identify what you're going to be talking about with keywords. So again, if our episode is documents for a college student, include that in your title. So when someone's searching for what documents do I need to have for my son when he goes off to school, it could come up. If you're doing an interview style podcast, drop your guest's name in there. Estate Planning 101 with Head of Admissions, John Spencer, right? It gives more opportunities for your episode to be found. The other critical thing, it goes back to your hosting platform, is include show notes for your episode. And really, show notes are a summary of what you're talking about, right? Talking with this guest on this topic, covering these issues. Why you want to do that is you want, Google to index that page and find it. You want AI to look in there and find it. It'll be searching through that show notes for those keywords for search engine optimization. And along with that, I strongly suggest including a transcript. The platform we use, Descript, it'll automatically generate a transcript for you, and you can just upload it. But whatever platform, whatever tool you're using, export a transcript and get it up there with your podcast. Now, that's not for someone to follow along and read while they're listening to your podcast. Again, it's for the search engines and AI to find it. So they'll read through that transcript and identify those keywords and phrases. So come up with a self-explanatory title for your episode. Be sure to include show notes and bios and graphics and a transcript to help with SEO and help people find your episode. Now, other ways to get your podcast for folks to find your podcast, other promotion besides SEO is kind of what you would expect that you do with other marketing materials, with, say, if you write an article or that sort of thing. Start with your firm's website. If you have a section of your website for blogs, create a blog entry for each one of your episodes. Create an announcement blog entry saying, hey, new podcast launching. Put it there on your blog or in your news feed on your website. For the individual episode entries in your blog, embed the video. It's really easy to do with most hosting platforms. Include the show notes, everything. Again, it's SEO. It's getting more opportunities for Google to find the content. Add it to your bio. You can have links to your episodes in your bio. Drop a reference to your podcast in your bio. Say you practice this area of law in this office. This is your clients. This is what you do. And at the bottom, say you're the host of Employee Benefits 101 podcast, and have a link to it. Depending on how your firm operates, you can also have links to it on your homepage. Crawl across the bottom, new episode dropped of Estate Planning 101. You click here to watch it. The other ways, obviously, to promote your content, your video, or your podcast is through social media. We talked a bit ago about little clips that are formatted for social media to get people's attention and drive people back to your hosting platform or subscribe. But one of the things I strongly suggest is that you create a dedicated social media channel for your podcast. You can use your firm's social media for promotion, but have a dedicated social media channel or account for your podcast. Release your episodes or promote your episodes through that. It allows you to correspond with your audience, engage with the audience over social media through your podcast, not through your law firm. So try to keep that siloed. It also helps if other attorneys in your firm want to start a podcast as well. You don't have that cannibalization of multiple podcasts all using the same social media channel to distribute their product. So come up with a dedicated social media channel. Repurpose your content. You can use the topic of conversation as a blog post. not just for video. You can ask colleagues to share your content, your podcasts. That sort of repurposing, you've already created it. Find other creative ways to get it out there. And last but not least, email. It's not dead. People still use it. Not everyone ignores it. If you have a firm client list, email, and those on the list are amenable to receiving updates from your firm on marketing content, announce your podcast to the email list. If you have a newsletter, share it on your newsletter. Have highlights from the firm, and then in the corner have, hey, latest episode of Estate Planning 101. Click here to watch it. And one thing you shouldn't ignore is the power of a one-to-one email. Let's say, for example, you have a cold client that you haven't heard from in a while. Rather than reaching out to them and saying, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have any work you can give us? Make a much more natural interaction with them. Say, hey, hope things are going great. I'm really excited. I just launched this podcast. Here's an episode of a topic that we kind of talked about before. Listen to it when you get the chance and let me know what you think. Much more natural interaction with somebody to get that conversation flowing back and forth again. The next hurdle you have to cross with podcasting is pod fade. Now, what's pod fade? Most of the time when people start to do a podcast, they go like gangbusters right out of the gate, and then it falls by the wayside. That's pod fade. All right. From what I saw, it takes 10 to 12 episodes for you to get your groove, figure out what works and what doesn't work, and get comfortable with the podcasting format. Unfortunately, like I said, most folks do 2-3 episodes, and then it kind of falls by the wayside. So why does that happen, and how do you prevent it? Come up with a cadence that makes sense for you. Don't kill yourself with a one-a-week cadence of distributing the podcast. That's way too much. Come up with something that can balance with your workload. The other thing I strongly suggest is something I mentioned before: batch record. Have a bunch of episodes already in the can, ready to go. So that way, if life happens and you get busy, you have something that'll get you through that lull. So you can keep your cadence going and keep your podcast going. Now, if all that fails and you still want to keep your podcast going, but you just can't find the time, there's nothing wrong with doing a greatest hits episode, of repeating an episode that got a lot of attention. That's okay. Just keep that cadence going. Now, analytics are critical. All the hosting platforms will have analytics. Check out your episodes when they come out, and watch those listenerships and the subscriptions and the downloads. That's very important for shaping future content. It allows you to tailor what you're going to be doing in the future based on what was hot, what got the engagement. But please don't be discouraged if your analytics aren't great. If you're not, the daily right out of the gate with a podcast, you have thousands of listeners. This is just another tool for potential clients to find you, right? So having it out there, just having it out there is a great opportunity. If you have a topic that was great or a guest that was really great, you'll invite that guest back on for a repeat episode. Not a repeat episode, but a follow-up episode, or to talk about a different topic or related topic. Now, growing your podcast, you want it to grow, you want that attendance to keep growing. Ask your listeners for feedback. That's a great way to identify topics that people are interested in that could increase engagement. Guest-led promotion. This is something I mentioned way back at the beginning. having a guest on your podcast that's not from your firm, someone from outside of the firm, is a great way to double your audience, right? If you distribute your podcast to everyone in your network and your guest does the same, that's a whole new world of audience that you're not in touch with, that can learn about you, learn about your brand, learn about your knowledge. Also, if scratch each other's backs. If you've got a guest on your podcast, in 6 months, go on their podcast. Again, it's a way to expand the reach of your message and get you out there. Promote your podcast whenever you're out there in public. If you are at a presentation, like you say you're speaking on employment law in a seminar, mention in your presentation that you host a podcast on employment law, and so that the group of people there will seek it out. If you're sending out marketing materials, if you do a pitch packet or something, make sure you mention your podcast in there so people can find your podcast. Put it out there to help get people to find it. This is another, I probably should have made it its own slide. Use other platforms for distribution. If you do nothing else, please put it on YouTube. YouTube is fantastic. A lot of people are doing searching in YouTube for content. You've already got a recording, you've already got a file. Create a channel for your podcast and post it up there on YouTube. It's another opportunity for search engines to find it, for AI to find it. But I highly suggest create your own channel for your podcast. Upload your video. Well, what if you have only audio? There's nothing wrong with creating, a 45-minute long audiogram of your audio-only podcast. People will find it and they'll listen to it in the background while your audio file is playing. It doesn't have to be actual physical person, talking in your podcast. So YouTube. Request topics. Ask your guests to promote. Have people get sick of you mentioning your podcast when you're out and about, and be sure to put it up there on YouTube. All right, closing thoughts on podcasting here. 3 takeaways for you. Perfection is the enemy of progress. I think that's how the quote goes. Just be consistent with your podcast. Try to stick to the same format, try to stick to the same branding, try to stick to the same cadence. That's how you're going to build an audience. If you delay releasing episodes because you want to make them absolutely perfect, that's going to hurt you. So just be consistent with your podcasting. 2, let your personality shine. I mean, that's the real benefit of podcasting, is introducing yourself to a whole new audience of people, potential clients, and letting them see who you are, what you know, how you interact with people, and what I like to say is what it will be like to work with you. All right, that's what you should be sharing with your potential clients. What's it going to be like to work with you? If someone's looking for an estate planning attorney and they listen to your podcast, and like I said before, this person seems really personable. I'm not intimidated by them. I was kind of hesitant to talk to an attorney, but this person seems great. Or the other hand, if I want someone who's very forceful to help with our matter, this guy, this podcaster, they seem like they know what they're doing. Let that personality shine through in the podcast, right? That's the benefit of doing podcasting. And finally, make it fun. As I said before, podcasts tend to fade over time. That's much more likely to happen if you're not having fun. It's a very fun platform. Meeting new people when you do guests, building those relationships, coming up with interesting topics to talk about. Hosting a podcast It's not going to make you a ton of money. You know, if you get lucky and get 1 million subscribers to your podcast, fantastic. Congratulations. But the point of podcast is marketing yourself. But it can be very rewarding if you give it, if you're into it, if you're into the topic and into the guests. It can be a great additional marketing tool in your marketing toolbox. So with that, thank you very much for attending today. I know I went super fast, and I apologize for that. Here's my contact information up on the board if you have any questions. Please feel free to reach out to me over email. There's my Rain BDM website or my LinkedIn profile. So let me give you your highlights again for podcasting. Come up with a theme of your podcast. What do you want to talk about? Determine what format you want to do. Do you want to do a short form, long form, interview style? Figure out where you want to record your podcast. Are you going to record your podcast in a studio? Or are you going to DIY it and do it all yourself, one person shop? Or are you going to do sort of a hybrid and farm out part of the responsibility to an outside party? Get the tech that you need. Definitely get a microphone. Definitely get a set of headphones. Investigate tools for recording and editing. Get that all lined up. Before you start the recording process, come up with a series of episode topics, what you want to talk about. Come up with your branding. You're going to need to brand your podcast. So come up with a catchy title for your podcast. Come up with a logo for your podcast. Figure out some intro, outro music, that sort of thing. Once you get all that branding packaged, that's when you should find a hosting platform, create some social media channels for it, create a YouTube channel for your podcast. And that could be a lot of work. That's why that hybrid method is very popular. Have someone else help you do those things. You concentrate on the content. Once you've recorded your podcast, have an editing platform to do the editing. Edit the content to take out repetitive phrases or things like that. Move things around that make more sense. Take out things that you want to add music, add captions, all that sort of stuff. I got a question here. What are the main factors you consider when deciding the right format for a podcast? It's what factors to consider. It's all based on your comfort level with podcasting and your time commitment and what you want to get out of it. If you really like engaging with other people, maybe the guest is the right format to use. If you're really pressed for time and you want to do just quick one-hitter videos or podcasts, stick with a short one. Now, you don't have to stick with one format throughout your entire podcast lifespan, but just consider what your audience is expecting from you. If your podcast is centered around interviewing local businesses, you want to stick with that if that's what your audience is expecting. If you suddenly switch to late-breaking news podcasts, you may lose that audience. Excellent question. Come up with a distribution strategy. Come up with a cadence that's going to work for you and your workload, and stick to that cadence. And the best way to stick to that cadence is to record in batches. I mentioned it a bunch of times. Have a bunch in the hopper, so that way, if you hit a lull, you can ride it out. Another question: what is the best way to analyze an audience before choosing a format? Excellent question. You could look at what other firms are doing. It might not be the best way to do it. I really think look to what's popular, look to what interests you, and go with that. Again, podcasting, it's going to work if it works for you, if it's what you're interested in. So distribution, getting it out over social media, mention as many times as possible. Have fun with a podcast. Okay. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate your time joining this presentation. And again, I apologize if I talked way too quickly. I was trying to get a lot of information out there in the time that was allotted. So if you have any further questions, please reach out to me. Thank you again for everyone who submitted questions. Thank you, attendees, for attending, and a special thank you to MyLawCLE for hosting. Have a great rest of your day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Gideon Grunfeld. I'm the president of Rainmaking for Lawyers. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you to discuss how to build online credibility so you get more referrals and grow your practice. So let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I got contacted by a family law attorney, and she, like you, like all of us, was interested in growing her online presence. And she had a very specific problem. She had just done something that I think a lot of us think about, something pretty traditional at this point. She had talked to a few SEO companies, search engine optimization companies, about driving more traffic to her website. And they gave her very detailed, thorough proposals. And the companies were very reputable. There was one problem. There was an enormous mismatch between the scope of the proposals that she was receiving, their cost, and her ability to actually process the kind of clients and the amount of clients that the SEO strategy was designed to create. The companies were saying this is going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000 a month. It's going to generate 5, 7, 8 referrals every month, depending on how much content we write. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar to you, but for her, it was overkill. And so that led to the question of, what can she do online? What can she do online beyond SEO? And this is not going to be a presentation at all about saying your website doesn't matter or driving traffic to it doesn't matter. That would be foolish. But what we are going to do is we're going to take a very strategic, specific approach to figuring out what you can do to build credibility online. And I'm going to use her story as an example throughout the presentation that we can learn things from. And so let's start with her first conundrum. What kind of work did she want to attract? And in her particular case, she had a very specific kind of family law she liked. As many of you know, family law practitioners come in many flavors. Some of them are very collaborative. It's all kumbaya, let's get together. We don't do highly contested cases. Some only do prenups. They don't do litigation at all. Others do, as part of what they do, highly contested cases. And she, in particular, liked those cases. She wanted to do very contested, where I would consider, and where I think a lot of people would consider, difficult cases. That was the niche that she wanted. That was the work that she most wanted to attract. And the reason I start with that is because if you don't know what kind of work you want or most want, then you do dabbling. You do a little of this, you network here, you do a blog post, you go do a Yelp review, you respond to this online, you do that online. And so the key to a strategy and the key to choosing the right mix of actions to take is knowing what strategy you want to follow. And what strategy you want to follow depends on a bunch of factors, starting with what work you most want to attract. Not all the work you could ever do, but what work specifically you want. And then the question becomes, of all the ways that you can do this in the online world, what are the combination of things that will work for you to make that happen? That's the purpose of this presentation. It's to give you an actual roadmap so that you, by the end of this presentation, can figure out or get more clarity as to, of the various options that are available to me in terms of building my online presence, in terms of building my online credibility, which are the ones that are the best fit for me. And what that means is that your answer to this question should be different than other people who are going through this experience, other people who are attending at the same time. And it's possible that your answer to this question, or the series of answers or priorities you identify, will be different than what you and your firm would have done a few short years ago. That's how quickly the world is changing. That could be how fast your market is changing. That is the nature of what it is to be a lawyer today. So with that background in mind, with that sort of framework in mind, we're here to go figure out what specific strategies you want to employ. So let's talk a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the specifics. So there's an element of this that really is almost like a workshop. It is designed that at the end, you actually will take a piece of paper. There is a worksheet attached to this. And if you access it now, great. If you don't worry about it. We'll actually I'll point out exactly during the presentation when to look at the worksheet. We're going to work through it together like a roadmap so that you can identify which specific priorities you have in terms of how to build your online credibility. So with those housekeeping matters out of the way, let's talk about the most important thing. And this is the part that most people miss. People judge their marketing strategy by the wrong factor. What they say is it keeping me busy? Does it seem to be keeping me, am I busy doing it? Is it keeping me active? When I look back at my week, did I spend marketing time? Did I do online stuff? And the problem with that is the most important thing is to get the strategy right. And that's what people are not taking the time. I've been an active lawyer for 10 years. I've lost some of the largest firms in the country. I've been advising and been a consultant to law firms for more than 20 years. I come from a family of lawyers. Like my family reunions are the equivalent of like small bar association events. And so this has been part of my life for my entire life. And I can tell you that what most people are doing, the most usual approach you see to both online and real world, if you will, networking and marketing and building credibility, is they dabble. A little random networking event here, a little online post here, here's something on LinkedIn, here's something I did this once. I wrote one ad and we ran it for 2 weeks, dabbling. And the problem is that people don't have a strategy. You got to get the strategy right first. And so let's talk about what the blueprint should include. We're going to start with the blueprint. We're going to start with the basics. And then some of the examples I'm going to give you are not online because they're much more relatable. And then we're going to apply it to something between 8 and 10 specific strategies that you can use. And the whole purpose of this is, as you're listening to the strategies, see which ones resonate with you most, which ones seem the most relevant, seem the most actionable, speak to you the most, because this is about identifying priorities. So what makes the right strategy when it comes to building your credibility online? The first, and I already alluded to it, is this: have a specific goal in mind. And the more specific the goal, the more likely you are to achieve it. So let me give you the example back to the family law attorney. I said to you, she likes contested cases. So when we started working with her, we asked her, can you tell me more? What is an example of the kind of work you would really relish? You would enjoy it. It's good. You're good at it. It's financially, it makes sense. What kind of work is that? And so, like most people, she didn't have an answer on the top of her head. And that is because as humans, we're much more, how should I say it? We're more sensitive to pain than we are to pleasure. If I ask you, tell me who your worst boss was or the worst meal you ever had, you probably don't need my help. You probably can remember it off the top of your head. You have a very vivid, visceral experience of bad experiences. If I asked you what was the best client you had or what work would you like to replicate, most lawyers and others tend to struggle with that because they underestimate how difficult a question that is to answer. But if you want to have a successful online strategy, if you want to build credibility, it really helps. It's almost indispensable. It will save you tons of time and money. You'll be much more efficient if you know your goal. So in her situation, here's how the conversation unfolded. And I'm doing this so that you can begin to think of what is the corresponding answer for you. And so here's how this conversation unfolded with this particular family law attorney. She wants to do contested work. I said, is there an example of the kind of work that you would love to do? Almost every time you do it, was there a past experience you would like to replicate? If you could, not down to the client, I mean, because it could be work you love, but that particular client was difficult, or there was something about the facts of the case that just didn't go your way, or the negotiations weren't to your liking. But as a general matter, you love that kind of work, you excel at it. And she said, sure. And she described something that is one of the most highly contested, emotional, intense parts of any family law matter. And that is when one of the parents wants to take a minor child out of the jurisdiction on a permanent basis. It's called different things in different jurisdictions. In California, where I am based, it's called a move away order. It may be called something slightly different where you are. But she wanted to do move away orders. And so now we had a specific kind of goal. She wanted to do, in her case, given the size of her firm, she said, if I could do 1 or 2 more move away orders every quarter, like 4 to 8 a year, that would be awesome. Okay, my word's awesome. But she was really happy with that. She wanted that to be the goal. And because she knew her goal, we were then able to identify the next step in the strategy, which is, who do you want to reach who can help you achieve that goal? And in this case, and this is going to apply to you both online and regular marketing, it's going to be 2 kinds of people. It's going to be the ultimate person who needs your services, the client or the potential client, and it's going to be the referral source. And who's the referral source? Referral sources, whether they're online or real life, in person, they always have one thing in common. Your best referral sources meet your best potential clients before you do. So that could be an individual. It could be, in her case, another family law practitioner. It could be a financial advisor, or it could be a website that her clients visit, somewhere they go online, something that they see online. But it's always the pattern that once you identify the kind of work you want to do, in this case, move away orders, there's some target audience of both the client and referral sources that allow you to go reach them. And then the question is, of the online sources, which ones make sense? And we already talked about building traffic to your website is always an option. But let's see what we can do beyond that. So if you have a plan, and then you have a target audience, then you need a tailored message to them. What is the message that's going to build you credibility? And we'll give you several examples, because credibility doesn't come from just one place. You'll see there are at least 9 specific places or sources of credibility that we're going to review, which are going to be the heart of this presentation. Because if you understand where credibility comes from, that's going to tell you, along with your business plan, what your messaging should be. And not to be a tease, but let me tell you in general what the answer is off the top. One thing that has a commonality, and when you know you're on the right track for your messages, is that your message, when you write it either to your client or your referral source about the specific goal you're trying to reach, is always going to be some version of, I have done this, or I've solved this problem for people just like you, or for stuff even more complicated or sophisticated than your situation presents, whatever that means. In her case, it could be, let's talk about examples of within the world of highly contested, let me showcase some enormously, crazily contested, difficult situations, because people will realize that if she knows how to deal with something even more egregious than what I am facing with, this lawyer probably can go help me too. Let me go contact this person. So that's an element of credibility. Your messaging is always going to be some version of, I have helped you. I know how to solve this problem. And ideally, it's going to have some ratcheting. It's going to be, I've done more sophisticated stuff. I'm going to give you some examples, more sophisticated than what you need, and what is more sophisticated than what applies to you. And the reason is that if the problem you solve is more sophisticated, people will correctly assume that you can ratchet down. If you only give people basic stuff you solve, they may conclude, okay, this lawyer or law firm can do basic stuff, but they can't handle stuff that I perceive to be more sophisticated than that. It's not the arrow doesn't flow in the same direction easily. It flows from more sophisticated to less sophisticated, not the other way around. And then the other thing is, and this is to echo a little bit what the prior speaker said about podcasts, what Jonathan Spencer said about consistency matters, but not perfection, is, yeah, if you're going to go have this message, it should be not identical, not perfect, but consistent, so people get from a variety of online platforms, from a variety of online resources, this same message about your expertise. So those are the four elements. You got to have a specific goal. That makes things much easier. If you want to use the example of, hey, let me take examples of something I already experienced as a lawyer, as a law firm, I want to replicate them, that's a great place to start. Identify the kind of target audience, who's the message for that target audience, and then you don't know exactly the details yet, perhaps, but you're going to commit that I'm going to have not a perfect, but a consistent approach, because it's not going to be, let me just do this once. Credibility comes from consistent messaging. So with that overview, let's start talking about the details of what determines your strategy. Let's kind of dig a little deeper. So one of the things that you'll notice, and I'm sure you've experienced, is that your strategy is dependent not only on the overall things I said, hey, when you go talk to a referral source is someone who meets your best clients before you do. That's generally true. But when you look at the messaging in particular, it's dependent on, in part, your business model and how sophisticated your audience is. So let's talk about those, starting with the issue of the audience. So you might be in a situation, and family lawyers are in this situation a lot, where their ultimate client may or may not be very sophisticated at what they do. Most of them may not have gone through divorce before, although more and more people are either directly or indirectly experiencing through friends and society, so they're more knowledgeable about it. But they may not be very sophisticated at all. And some of you might be ERISA lawyers, some of you might be tax lawyers, some of you might be international, some of you might be doing mezzanine financing on deals, where your audience, conversely, might actually be sophisticated, that your best clients are knowledgeable people within that field. If you're a tax lawyer, your best referrals might be from other tax lawyers, CPAs, financial advisors, other transactional lawyers. So there's going to be a wide variety of differences among people in this audience listening both now and downloading this later as to how sophisticated your audiences are. The slide says is, but it really should say are. And the reason is because there are two audiences. One is your clients. How sophisticated are they? And the other is, how sophisticated are your referral sources? And you might be in a situation where, let's say immigration law, family reunification immigration, you're trying to prevent people from being deported, you're trying to get families together, you're bringing people from abroad. Your clients may not be very sophisticated, but your referral sources really might be. And so you might want to have, you strongly should have different strategies for communication. The other is this: what is your business model? Because one of the things that has to make sense is that the strategy that you choose, online or offline, has to make sense for your business model. Recall, with this family law example, one of the issues was that the SEO model wasn't a bad model. It wasn't like the companies were bad. It just didn't fit her model because she couldn't do high volume. And most lawyers are not built for high volume. And the determination that you're not built for high volume has a lot to do with the messaging strategy. And that's going to come into play when you select where online you want to be, what you say online, and let's dive into that in more detail. So let's start with the negative example. The negative example is there's a mismatch between the work you want and your business model. Let's say your business model is, we're not looking for high volume. If you're an estate planning firm, we're not looking to do 8,000 wills and trusts, which are all basic trusts, which is, by the way, a fabulous business, highly needed. But let's assume that's not your business. And most law firms aren't built for very high amounts of volume. So if you're not trying to reach volume and you're not trying to reach a lot of people who are unsophisticated, then make sure your messaging applies. Where you go online should fit. And especially now, because people don't appreciate just how much free basic content is out there in any field. Corporate, litigation, transactional, regulatory, antitrust, litigation, international. You can go on AI, you can go on Google, any other search engine you want. In a couple of minutes, you can come up with lots and lots of free examples of newsletter content and other website content, podcasts. You can get a lot of basic information. So for those of you who are not fluent in Pig Latin or wondering what does ixnay mean, and that might be also an age-related thing, when I grew up, ixnay meant do not do, stop. Unless your model is, I want high volume for people who are not sophisticated, your basic message should not be, for example, if you're an estate planning lawyer, don't die without a will. It's really bad to die without a will. You should go because there's a delay. And if we set up trusts instead of that, you avoid probate. You can see that endlessly. And that may not make sense if your goal is to do sophisticated estate planning. If you're trying to do, for example, estate planning for individuals that have tax consequences, a message like, don't die without a will, probably not going to be very relevant, not going to add to your credibility. If anything, it's going to make people who are in your target audience think that you're writing too basic, that what you do isn't sophisticated enough for them. So there's no right one answer to this, but recognize that how sophisticated your clients are is one kind of messaging. How sophisticated your referral sources are, a second avenue, a second channel of marketing and of messaging, and how high volume your business are. Those three factors put together go a long way in determining what the right strategy is. So let's give you one concrete example that is not an online example, and then we'll jump into we'll go deeper into the example of what did the family lawyer do? What did we do with her in advising her? So the reason I use electronic newsletters is because not only are there a common misconception about what they're good for, they're a fabulous illustration of something that happens all the time, and that is this. When you have a well-designed roadmap, when you have a well-designed online strategy that builds your credibility, you have specific channels of communication. You have specific methods of sending out your message that are targeted to specific audiences. You're not just throwing like spaghetti against the wall and something sticks. What a lot of firms do when we start working with them is that they use the same style, the same communication, the same level of detail, the same level of sophistication in everything they do, whether they're writing for their website, whether they're writing for LinkedIn, whether they're writing, like everything sounds the same, it looks about the same. And so let's use electronic newsletters to highlight a better way for you to do this. And this applies both to your newsletters and even more importantly for this presentation, it really applies to how to select you're the right combination of online marketing, online messaging to build your credibility online. So what's the mistake with newsletters? So let me talk about how we use ours. The mistake that people do is that they don't have a particular goal or audience in mind. And so how do we send out a newsletter? So in our world, as a consulting firm, and we have lawyers who've worked at firms, and we consult a lot with lawyers throughout the country. We are not trying to get basic messaging to them. We're not writing, it would be good to have a website. So that's one part of our strategy. The more important part of our strategy is that we have tied in that we're using the newsletter, and you should do the same for a very specific audience. And in that case is the newsletter audience for us. And it doesn't mean that's going to be true for you, but we're just using newsletters as an example. For us to reach people who have prior contact with us, but they're not yet our VIPs. They're not like raving fans yet. They're not like, oh, they already referred a ton of work to us. They're the people who've seen us speak. Those are the people who I've met. I have their business cards. They've been introduced to me. They've seen me online. These are the people that we are trying to stay in touch. We're trying to educate them. So a newsletter in our world has a very specific purpose and a very specific audience. We're trying to educate people who already know us. We're not using that to meet new people. We're not writing the same thing on LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn more for that purpose, to reach out to people, because LinkedIn has a searchable element to it that our newsletter does not. Strangers can go find us on LinkedIn. They're not going to find us easily on a newsletter. So what does that mean? Our strategy for writing our newsletter is to write in-depth, complicated stuff that people can't readily get everywhere else. In a world where there's an overflow of information, for us, the newsletter is a way to educate people, and that's where we build credibility. And we don't use the newsletter for our VIPs. We don't use it for the people who are referring work, friends of the firm. For them, we used a customized approach for every person. We know what they like to order. We know what they like for gifts. We customize holiday stuff for them. We know where they went to school, right? That's what makes VIPs VIPs. That when someone is a VIP, they merit individualized, customized outreach. Our newsletter is, we hope, going to create future VIPs. And so, and for our purposes, the reason we're using this in this presentation is to show you an example of when you have the right roadmap, you actually can look at every element of your marketing plan, every form of communication, and say, oh, we're trying to reach so-and-so. That is for referral sources. That is for people who are trying to search for us online. That has a geographic scope. We're trying to do that for people who live nearby in our neighborhood. You have a specific strategy that then dictates where you go online. And so if you're wondering, the general principle is the more sophisticated your either clients or referral sources are, the more sophisticated your content should be, because there's a lot of free basic stuff online. Even something as what seems sophisticated, and that bar of what's considered sophisticated is getting higher and higher. It used to be that if a new law was passed locally, your state, nationally, if a law firm summarized it, like, that was really good. That was, and it is, it's still a useful service. But in today's world, within 48 hours of a lot of laws coming out, hundreds, dozens, depending on the importance of the law, this visibility of accounting firms, law firms, bloggers have summarized the law. So part of what you want to do is connect the dots for people, where your credibility comes from. And this is going to be really important when we start looking at specific online applications, is it's not just saying what the law is, it is prioritizing. It's telling them this is really important, but this one's a little less important. Because in a world where you're really busy and you get so many emails and you're on the phone, and some people are on the phone 5-6 hours a day, and you're being bombarded with thousands of messages, what gets credibility and what gets attention is when you connect the dots for people and you tell people what's important, when you aggregate information and prioritize. So that's how we happen to use our newsletter. It doesn't mean you have to do the same. But what you should do is, to repeat myself a little bit, make sure that when you have your roadmap, you can decide, oh, if we have a newsletter, we're doing this. If we're having an event, we're going to do this. If we're going to be on this website, we're using it for this purpose. We're trying to reach this specific audience because we're trying to get our version of more work for move away order cases, whatever that means for you. So if you're looking as just an example, this is one of our, just an example of what it looks like. Our newsletter is called Rainmaking Matters. And one of our ones from earlier this year was how to raise your rates on existing clients in the middle of the year, right? Something that we think is topical, sophisticated, and it combines a lot of information about a very specific topic that we would love to go help people with. There's an actual strategy that the strategy comes first, and then that leads to understanding what's the messaging. And then the messaging then depends on how do we circulate this message. And in this case, these are people who already know us, and then that's how we're using the newsletter. So with this backdrop, I want to review one more thing before we get into specifics of the roadmap for online content. So let's slow down the pace a little bit, right? It's gone pretty quickly, giving you a lot of high-level strategic observations. Now let's get nitty-gritty. And when we use a very specific recurring example, you see it online all the time. You see it on websites. You see it on almost every platform has this, and that is a testimonial. And so it is a great example of how to understand where credibility comes from. So let me show you two examples of testimonials. And here's the question. Testimonial number one, best singer I've ever heard. Okay, pretty straightforward, nice, short, sweet. Second testimonial, best investor I know, I learned a lot from her. If I ask you the question, what's the most important part of a testimonial? But I've asked this question to hundreds and hundreds of people during prior speeches. And here's what the recurring response is. The most common response that you tend to get is that the words of the testimonial are the most important part of the testimonial. So if the testimonial says something like, this law firm, and then you name the lawyers by name, Jackie Ellington did a fabulous job representing me in this, and she got me terrific results, right? And then whatever that means. A lot of people, and especially lawyers, tend to think, and I think the reason especially lawyers is because we tend to be more word-oriented, more language-oriented. We read more than most non-lawyers do. We think that is that's the highest part, that's the most important part, that's the most impactful part of a testimonial. We think that's where the credibility of a testimonial comes from. Consider the following. Same testimonials, how many people think there's a difference once you see that this apocryphal testimonial comes from Beyonce, the best singer I've ever heard? Right? It makes an enormous difference. Let's go to the other example. Best investor I know, I learned a lot from her, says Warren Buffett in this imaginary world I created. Why is this so important? It highlights something that you have to understand. You will make your life so much easier online if you understand the principle that we're talking about here, that we're showing right here. It's not the words that matter the most. Obviously, the words matter. I mean, if the words were like, well, I worked reluctantly with this law firm and they did an adequate job, and given what it cost, I'm generally pleased, but not ecstatic. Obviously, those words are not going to help a lot because of the tone. But don't mistake that if the word said, this was a great law firm, they got me a great result, that by itself establishes credibility. It does not. It's the identity of the person who gives you the testimonial. That's where the credibility comes from. If Warren Buffett actually said to some financial advisor or investor and said about her, she's the best investor I know, I learned a lot from her, what makes that off the chart credible and impactful online and elsewhere is the source. Now, you might be, and the same thing is true, Beyonce commenting on someone's singing ability. So let's not make another mistake. Just because I gave you two examples of essentially celebrities doesn't mean that if you don't represent someone who is world famous, this won't apply to you. It absolutely does. So let's show you how. I'm using examples of world famous people so that you know who we're talking about, and it illustrates the point. So let's show you how to do this. So what do you actually do? So what do? Tell me who they are. Recognize the credibility comes from matching your target audience. So for example, I once worked with a criminal defense lawyer and had a testimonial from someone who got a great result. I was arrested on the side of the road, or they said I was arrested on the side of the road, and they found drugs in the back of my car, and I only got a 30-day jail sentence. Lawyer's amazing, happy to do it. Did we end up using that testimonial? And the answer is no. One is because that person wanted to use their name and we didn't even feel comfortable. But also, it's not super credibility enhancing for the work we most want to attract. I guess it's good to know that the guy thought that even though he was caught with drugs, he got a good result from this law firm. That wasn't the message the law firm wanted to use. What the law firm wanted to use is identify a testimonial, identify with someone who is a peer or highly respected by the people you're trying to attract. And if your clients, for example, are business owners, don't just say Charles Smith or Jane Velasquez. Tell me owner of so-and-so. And in fact, if they don't want to give their name, but they're willing to tell you the company they work for, or owner of a business with 200 employees located, then you choose a location within 10 miles of where your office is, that's what builds the credibility. It's the proximity of the person giving the testimonial, who's the source of the credibility, and it's their similarity and overlap with the people you're trying to reach. People will then go, oh, I'm a business owner. I'm not in that city, but I'm 2 miles away. And if this firm did a great job for that business owner, that's what you want to go do. You want to match the same thing with referral sources if you're going to have testimonials, because the credibility comes from people seeing that you can do for them or for the people they want to refer to you what you've done for other people who are like them. So you have to tell me who they are, or I wouldn't say you have to, because I see law firm websites and online posts where people say, great job, and they just list the initials. You can do that, but you're making your life a lot harder because that's not where the credibility comes from. So we've now used two examples of things that apply online and offline. Newsletters, obviously you can post newsletters online as well, of course. Testimonials appear everywhere, but they're highlighting essential elements of the roadmap we're about to build. And as always, just feel free to indicate what your questions are. We're now going to go even a step deeper in applying your online presence. And this is the heart. This is, if you had to pay attention for only 5 minutes, and this is also the key. Remember at the beginning I said there's going to be a part when I say go grab your worksheet or go grab a piece of paper. This is where you should do it. This is where this becomes actionable. And the question is, where does credibility come from? And that is the linchpin, right? Because if in the testimonial example, if you don't know where the credibility comes from, it's really hard to have the right message. It's hard to have the right strategy. And in the online world, not knowing where credibility comes from is the biggest mistake that people make. And so you have to know where the credibility comes from if you want to build your online credibility, right? That's literally the title of these 3 presentations together. It's about digital reputation management, building online credibility that's going to generate leads. So you have to know, or it's going to make your life a lot easier if you know where credibility comes from. So if you can access your worksheet, do it now. If you don't, absolutely don't worry about it, because the key part of the worksheet is on this slide. So literally take it. We're going to look at this slide a lot. You can just take a blank piece of paper and jot these down. We're going to go over 9 specific places where credibility comes from. And as I said at the very beginning, when we're talking about the family law firm, the one who wants to do these highly contested move away orders, we use essentially this framework to go figure out what to advise and what to implement and the results that came about from it. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to give you examples of all 9. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is, if you have the worksheet in the middle of the first page, it's only a 2-page document, go start jotting down, oh, that's what he means by visibility. That's what he means by Toastmakers. That's what that is. And circle the ones that you think are the most likely. They speak to you. They think you think they're going to be effective. Give them a priority. And then the last part of the worksheet is we're going to take a few minutes and you're actually going to prioritize the top 2. And then I'm going to highly recommend at the end, I'll say it now, and I'll say it again, probably at least once or twice. If you want to go implement, my business as a coach, a consultant, is to get people to actually change, for law firms to actually not only have the strategies, but to implement them. It's all about having mechanisms in place that get you to do things. And so one of the ones I highly recommend you do is, and it's easy to implement, is whatever you decide after watching this, whatever 1 or 2 are the priorities for you, get it out of your head. Let someone else know. It could be someone on your team. It could be another lawyer. If you're a solo, find another solo. Tell someone else so that they can help you, hold you accountable. Accountability buddies, accountability partners, incredibly useful. But before we get to that, that's how the worksheet ends. Find an accountability buddy. But let's figure out first the heart of what this presentation is about. And the heart of what this presentation about is, where does credibility come from, so you can choose how to design your map. So let's talk about, so there are only, results are probably the ones we've talked about the most. The results basically are, I have accomplished for other people something similar. I can help you with the problem you have, or even more sophisticated. And let me give you examples. That could be case studies, that could be some way, testimonials, some way of educating people about the results. That's one way that people get credibility. The really mystifying thing is that sometimes lawyers act as if this is the only place, it's the only source of credibility, and it is not. Humans are complicated. When they decide to hire lawyers and other professional service providers, they both think their way through this process and they feel their way through this process. Credibility doesn't come from just one thing. And knowing that you've achieved results, really helpful, but it may not be, because you might be, well, they're difficult to work with, or they're going to be expensive, or they may not be right for me, or a million things that, or maybe they're exaggerating or too good to be true. Remember, results are an important element, but they're not the only one. Visibility. Strange thing, but very idiosyncratic and true thing about human behavior. We tend to associate credibility with people who are more visible. That's why people speak. That's why people do presentations. Now, if the visibility is negative and they become notorious for something, not so much. But if one of the things that we see is that credibility comes from visibility. So one of the things you may want to think about as, independent of the results you accomplish, are there opportunities for you, for the work you most want to attract online? Can you enhance your credibility by enhancing your visibility? This is where someone who has lots of followers or friends online, or lots of other examples we can get into. Testimonials, we already went into that deal. When someone who is like the audience you're trying to attract says good things about you, super credibility enhancing if there's a good fit. A good match, a good fit between the person who's giving the testimonial and that person is seen as a peer of the person who you're trying to reach. Likability and approachability, incredibly overrated. Credibility comes from that, right? So one of the things that we have to be careful about, especially as lawyers, is too many lawyers are, when it comes to their area of expertise, the smartest person in the room, both literally and figuratively. It could be a room with four walls. It could be an online environment. But people don't want to feel stupid. And it's amazing to me that sometimes really smart people aren't very smart about coming across as unlikable or approachable, right? Because they might love your results, but you also want to come across as, credibility comes from likability and approachability. And so think about ways about what information you can share. We'll go through specific examples that will increase your likability and approachability, not in any method that you're trying to manipulate people, but you want to share genuine information. It has to be authentic. If people think that you're BSing them, then the game is over. Then there's almost nothing you're going to be able to tell them that is going to retrieve the situation, right? So you want to be able to tell them and share stuff or other people on your behalf that makes you likable and approachable. That's an important element of credibility, something for you to consider as we're deriving this roadmap. We've done 4 of the 9. The one in the middle is there for a reason, because it is become, in the online world, incredibly more powerful than it ever has before. It's existed before, and that is this concept of a tastemaker. Let me explain what that is. A tastemaker is, there's lots of things in life where we as consumers don't really know enough to have a strong opinion, but we are willing, many times for very good reason, to have someone give us guidance or dramatically influence who we think is good or bad. So if a movie wins the Oscars, if you're looking for a certain kind of movie, the people who give out the Oscars or even Oscar nominations are tastemakers. Because you're like, I don't know that movie. I don't know anything about that movie, but I heard it was nominated for an Oscar. Or it could be it got a Golden Globe, or it got a People's Choice Award, right? Very different feel, and there's not one right or wrong, but you notice those three organizations all are taste makers. They are places where the people who could hire you can get a judgment that's not necessarily their own, but it's sort of this collective, oh, this person thinks you're good. And that's an incredibly powerful source of credibility online. We'll give you a couple of examples, but I want you to start thinking about, are there organizations, are there people in your community online where they too are tastemakers for your clients and your referral sources? Are they, oh, that's where someone thinks, oh, if that person or that entity says you're a good lawyer or you do good work, it carries extra weight. We'll do a couple of these quickly. Attractiveness, literally how you look, how your office looks, how you dress the part. Credibility. We know this. There's a reason why news anchors kind of look the way they do, and some of it you can't control. I mean, we know that public officials and news anchors have highly and unusually highly symmetrical faces. Don't worry if you don't. But there are other elements of how you look, how you dress, that adds to your credibility. If I was an entirely different outfit, I'm pretty sure that your willingness to accept what I'm saying would be different. It goes down to lighting, it goes down to your office, and it doesn't mean you have to always be fancy, but it does mean making a conscious decision about attractiveness. And that's not only personal, your office, your location, your building is a powerful source of credibility online and offline, but especially online. Popular vote. Popular vote is, here's a perfect example. You're in a city and you don't know anyone in that city. And let's say you don't speak the language, but it's dinner time, or let's say Friday night, Saturday night, and there are two restaurants. And one is packed and one is next door and it's empty. And you can't even speak the language or read the language. Which one are you likely to go to? If you're like most people, you're going to be influenced, and you should be to some extent, by this idea of popular vote. It is sometimes referred to as social proof, that if enough people say that something is good, that by itself is an incredible source of credibility. And that in the online world has become immensely powerful. So we'll give you some examples of that. Two more, bling. Bling it's a little tied to visibility. Sometimes it's an indirect source of credibility. We think that people who are financially successful, and this doesn't apply to everyone, it doesn't apply to everything, but when you are not an expert in a field, we tend to think we trust an opinion more when we think someone has been financially or otherwise successful. We just take their opinion more, even on things that are not within their scope of their expertise. So you might say some wealthy person or successful business person, and it'd be one thing if people only did this for business related advice, but they may say, here's what I do for time management, or this is how I choose friends. And people tend to give people who have outward indicia of success, and for lawyers, power matters for credibility. And then the last one is the origin story, which I'll illustrate at the end, but quickly it's when people know what steps you took to become a lawyer, how you got here, why do you do this, that can be, not for everybody, but your origin story can be a powerful source of credibility. So let's start applying these. So if you're jotting notes, or if you have the worksheet, you may have already circled a couple, but let's kind of do a deep dive as we keep on going. Online visibility. Here's some examples: press releases, podcasts, and blogging, right? We talked about results. We'll talk about that in a few, give you more examples. So we're going to give you pretty rapid fire in the next 10, 15 minutes, examples of something to jog your memory, something to think, oh, we could do that too. Let's consider that. So a press release, why is it so visible? Part of it is for technical reasons, is that certain kinds of press releases show up in online search really quickly within a few weeks. And some of them cost $400. And sometimes if you want to just increase your visibility and your credibility, and you write a press release about a great result or community organization you joined, or a charitable thing your firm is involved with, press releases have an outsized ability because they're visible. And if you combine them with some of the other strategies, like we're attractive, we're likable, because we do interesting, good things for people, press releases. Podcasts, I'm not going to give you literally just spend a whole hour with someone on a podcast in terms of Jonathan Spencer. So let me just point out, what do podcasts have in common? If you go, let's go back a slide and then say, how many of these do podcasts potentially check the box of? Could you talk about results? Yes. Does it help with visibility? Yes. Could you have guests that share testimonials? Yes. Especially if you follow Jonathan's advice and have fun, shine, let your personality shine through. Could that increase your likability? Could you, if your setting is right, if your lighting is right, if you're dressed appropriately, could you, attractiveness, success, could there be social proof? So one of the reasons to strongly consider a podcast, of course, is because it checks a lot of these boxes. But it is an important sense. But because you did a whole hour on it, and same thing with blogging, realize that blogging too has you can checks a lot of these boxes: results, visibility, and so something to consider. But let's kind of take even a deeper dive. What does likability look like? And so here's an example of a press release. California Lawyers Foundation awards 12 scholarships funding education for students statewide. So part of your message doesn't have to be, a lot of times as lawyers, we're so linear. I am a tax lawyer, therefore all my content will be about tax. All my online presence will be about tax and the latest IRS regs. No, remember, your credibility comes not only from what you know, but also things like, let me sponsor something, let me go online, let me have a press release, let me be affiliated with a website of a charity that really matters, let me do cool things. It has to be authentic, because if you fake this, you're dead, because people will know it. But so long as it's authentic, likability and approachability are incredibly underappreciated tools for adding online credibility. Sponsor your softball team, sponsor a trophy, sponsor, do something that if it is tied in to your local community and the community you most want to reach for the work you most want to do, increasing your likability is an incredibly fast track way to increase your online credibility. A couple more examples. So this is the one that sometimes confuses people, so we're going to give you a couple of examples for legal and non-legal. Why did I use, so for those of you who travel, you might recognize this as an example of tastemaking, although you probably didn't think about it that way. What's the most influential travel website in the world? TripAdvisor. Why? Because it combines very powerful online influences. One of them is the social proof, the popular vote. So TripAdvisor looks at who ranked hotels. So I looked at hotels in New Orleans, and the Windsor Court Hotel ranked first based on popular vote. Just a lot of people rated it highly. It got a lot of high online reviews. That is what gives you credibility for certain kinds of markets, for certain kinds of lawyers. So you'll also notice that above the Windsor Court is a paid sponsorship. That's something else. Now, is it as credibility enhancing as getting all these people to give you social proof by popular vote? No, but that's a shortcut. It could be a pay-per-click campaign for your website. It could be for a lot of these platforms. You can do online advertising to increase your visibility and then link it back to good content on your site. And then you have credibility and visibility, a very powerful tool. So I highlight this for 3 reasons. TripAdvisor is an example of, it's a taste map maker. For people who have no idea about what hotel to go to, let me go see what TripAdvisor does. I will trust their rating. One, because of popular vote, and that means a sponsorship can also be really important on that platform. So this is the Michelin Guide. Works totally different. So Michelin, for those of you who are in the food world, started as a French tire company that started publishing a road map in like 100 years ago. It's now become one of the most influential sources of taste making for what is an elite restaurant. What are the best restaurants in your city or state or country? And it does not work by popular vote. This is the total opposite of popular vote. This is, we have secret people who go to restaurants and are experts in restaurants, and they write reviews, and they experience the product, and they are the tastemaker, and we don't care what the popular vote is. We're going to go. And there are people who literally plan their trips. Let's go to a Michelin-starred restaurant. Because online, you can now, even without popular vote, some authorities are so significant that they add tremendous amount of credibility. So what's the counterpart in the food world to Michelin? It is Zagat. Zagat started by a former lawyer and his wife in New York. They wrote online reviews for restaurants. They actually wrote handwritten reviews of restaurants. People said you should let other people know. And this is popular vote. When enough people think your restaurant is scored on a score of 0 to 30, and then they say your restaurant in New York City got 26 average score. This is a tastemaker. People who don't know restaurants and you've never been in a city, I'm going to go check this out, but this is popular vote. Michelin is experts. 2 different flavors. This is bling. This is someone wealthy. Mark Cuban says, here's my opinion of DEI programs. Why do we listen to him? He's visible. He's wealthy. You might agree with him. I'm not making a political statement. I'm just noting that whether you agree about DEI or not, it's not the point I'm making. It's look at who we give headlines to. People who are financially successful, even when they opine about other stuff, tend to get visible. So in your local community, you don't have to be a billionaire. Can you opine about stuff online in your local community? So how do you apply this as we're beginning to, let's start thinking about it. Results. Personal injury lawyers are the proven experts about using results. I could have used 1,000 explanations. I'm not even familiar with who this firm is. My assistant literally found this in 5 minutes online. Here's the results. Look at all the high verdicts we've gotten. You notice, and it follows the pattern. It's on our website. It could be on any online platform. We've recovered a ton of money for people. That's the work we want. We want serious injuries. That's their approach. Results. That's one of the things you can think about. Here is something on the total opposite end of the spectrum. Remember, there's Michelin Guide. This is experts. This is not popular vote. So, and normally 5 years ago, 2 years ago, I would not even mention in a presentation like this the Chambers Guide, because the Chambers Guide is a UK British publication that only applies historically to very large global firms. And again, they don't do popular vote. They literally ask the law firms to say, Tell us what you've worked on this year in your practice area, and give us examples of clients that with their consent we can interview. It's exactly like Michelin. This is for certain practice areas where I've advised, like healthcare. This is more important than working on your website, because Chambers in that world is such a big tastemaker. If they say either you're one of the top tier firms, they designate one of your lawyers by name, they identify them by name. So normally I wouldn't mention this except for one thing. Chambers is now beginning to branch out. They're not only dealing with super mega large global corporate firms, they're beginning to do anybody who works with high net worth individuals. So if you're thinking, hey, we do really good work, but for high net worth individuals, Chambers is now an option for you. It takes about 10 to 35 hours, depending on the size of your firm, to put together an annual Chambers submission. Sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times before they recognize you. But if you're looking for a source of mega credibility, not your website, things like Chambers are absolutely, if you happen to be in that narrow set of lawyers that meet Chambers requirements. And if you're looking for a much broader place for credibility, if you're looking for a much broader source of credibility, because it's not only for global elite firms, Best Lawyers. Some of you may have heard or know that Best Lawyers is tied to probably the single best case of sort of creating credibility and becoming a tastemaker from kind of out of whole cloth, just making it up and getting it to stick. And that's U.S. News and World Report. For those of you old enough to remember, U.S. News and World Report was a weekly magazine that covered the news. There was Time Magazine, there was Newsweek, there was U.S. News, and they were like perpetually in third place. And then one year they decided, we're gonna review colleges and universities. And that became a tastemaker. Parents started to go, where in the review, where does U.S. News and World Report rank this school? And that started to be highly influential, the rankings for colleges, law schools, and now they have broadened out their appeal to law firms. And this isn't only for large global firms. This is in almost every practice area, a tastemaker. If it fits your model, if this is the kind of work you do, go check out Best Lawyers, because it is a combo. It's a combo, it's a hybrid model. Some of it is popular vote. You can sponsor people and you can nominate, not sponsor, nominate is the right word. You can nominate people just so you can, like super lawyers, which is very much popular vote. Or you can also, in addition to that, they will want to interview your client. So it's not like totally Chambers. We don't care about popular vote at all. It's not 100% popular vote and nominations like super lawyers. Best Lawyers is something that putting together a profile, describing what you do, attracting the kind of work, having the visuals look right, very important source that I think is dramatically underutilized. It's one of there's a reason we put tastemakers in the middle, because as the world is evolving, and whether you think it's a good trend or a bad trend, I don't know. I'm just here to tell you what I see, and I do this day in, day out, and have for 20 years working with law firms. And that is, this has absolutely the role of tastemakers. If you in every field you can imagine, I was going to show a different slide. It's exploded. So for instance, what's the most influential movie review credibility source in the world? If you're old enough to remember, you might be like, I remember Pauline Kael was the person who wrote movie reviews for the New York Times. And then you might be like, well, a generation after that, there was Roger Ebert and Siskel and Ebert. Very visible, very credible. Now Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes drives more movie makers crazy because their tomato meter on a scale of 10 has become an incredible tastemaker. So it feels a little awkward because I'm giving you examples of restaurants and movies, and it feels a little awkward to be like, hey, we're lumped in as lawyers. We're a profession. We do some of the most important work for people's lives. And I'm telling you, online 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 platforms like this are becoming incredibly important. So let's take a couple of minutes as we're approaching. We have 10 minutes left, and let's begin to, as I'm going to read off all of the options, and you start thinking which are the two that you think are the most relevant to you, because this is far more than just saying we do good work. Results matter, but driving traffic to your website matters. But in today's world, when we work with clients, we look at this whole panoply of where you can be. And super lawyers, as I said, this is like Zagat's. This is popular vote. This is social proof. It's one of the places you get credibility, but you're getting less of a bang for your buck because people also want to get a sense of, oh, there's an expert opinion. There's someone who actually talked to my clients. And that's why I think best lawyers, and if Chambers works for you, Chambers is something highly to consider. So let's go look at the options at the worksheet. And again, so you can look at results. What do you want to add to results? Visibility, testimonials, those are 3. Likability and approachability. Are you going to sponsor some charity? Are you going to share information about yourself that makes you more approachable? Are you going to go invest in choosing the right platform for you? And so let me talk about the family lawyer at the beginning of this, that I mentioned first, because that's what we ended up doing for her. The question was, how do you, SEO was too much. She didn't have the bandwidth or the budget. So where could we get her online credibility that was affordable? So there was a key element of her business plan which might apply to many of you. Her business as a family lawyer was very localized. Her best clients came within a narrow driving distance. It's like she was almost like a real estate agent in that, people did not drive far. Her best clients, she could serve them the best. She liked them the best. It was the easiest for her. She did the best work. And so what's an online platform that's very local? And we looked at things like Yelp reviews and Google My Business. Now, Google My Business is sometimes summarized as GMB, but it is an online Google platform. Sometimes it's called Google Business Profile, and you can add your photos, your description, your hours, you can do case studies. That is an incredible source of online visibility because it's connected to Google. It tends to show up in search results. You can post reviews there, so it has the popular vote option. And that's what we ended up doing with this particular lawyer, because for her business plan, which was, she didn't have an enormous bandwidth, she didn't have an enormous budget, but she wanted to get people very local to her, and she wanted to then supplement that with networking and in-person stuff, and she did stuff at the Bar Association. We ended up working with her to get lots of reviews and lots of visibility and credibility on local business directories. So it could be Avo, it could be Yelp, it could be GMB, Google My Business. There are others, but that checked off a lot of the boxes because we could use results, we could show information about likability, we could show her office. There's an element of popular vote because that she got reviews. We could show success. We could take advantage of the fact that this was a very visible platform. Now, does that mean that that's the right answer for you? No. But what it does mean is this. It does mean that you want to connect the dots. The reason that worksheet is there is so that you can say, here are the 2 that matters most to me. Let me get an accountability buddy. Because when you connect the dots appropriately, that is what gets you outsized online credibility. That's where you get your leads from. That's where you get to replicate the work you most want to do. So there are a few minutes left. There are 5 minutes left. So there's one we haven't talked about. So let me give you an example of what an origin story looks like. And let me say up front, normally I wouldn't explain, like I wouldn't sort of peel the curtain behind, so you can see what I'm doing behind the scenes, because it tends to reduce the effectiveness of this. But I also just want you to see genuinely how this works, and showing you like a little bit how they connect the dots. So it turns out that I do come from a family of lawyers, and I am fourth generation lawyer on my mom's side. And it's almost a genetic defect, because we literally have been lawyers on multiple continents. My mom was a lawyer beginning in 1954. And for those of you keeping track, that's 5 years before Ruth Bader Ginsburg went to law school in the United States. My mom was a lawyer until she was 88 years old. And for me, this is not just business. Yes, I am honored to work with lawyers about what they do. I think a lot of the work we do is, yes, we want to help them make more money, but a lot of it is we want to elevate the status of lawyers, because it's kind of in my blood. And the reason I tell you my origin story and why origin stories can be really powerful is because they address something really important in credibility, and that is this. When people know why you do what you do, and one of the ways they may know why you do what you do is because of your origin. In my case, I come from a family of lawyers, and I've dedicated the last 35 plus years to elevating the status of lawyers, because this is my family business, this is my tribe. Then people correctly assume that if they know why you're doing it, you're more likely to be responsive. You're more likely to, if they know that you care, it's a source of credibility. Another great example that doesn't have to do with me, I know a banker, and as we're wrapping up, let me share her story with you so you see how these origin stories work, which is she was a banker who, as a child, her family lost its business in a fire. And she saw how the Small Business Administration came and saved her family business and allowed it to get back on its feet. And later on in life, she became a small business banker. So knowing nothing else about her, do you think she sucks at her job? No, because you see that she's motivated. This is part of her background. You get a sense of, when you know the why of someone does something, then it tells you a lot about how likely they're going to do it, why they do it. And in this case, what's on the screen, that's a picture of my mom, who passed away 1.5 years ago. This was on the anniversary, the first anniversary of her passing. I didn't really want to post something too public about it. But last year I decided in December, you know what, let me, as a tribute to my mom and the first anniversary of her passing, write about her career as a woman lawyer. And I was astounded by the response this got. And I wasn't really intending other than a tribute to my mom. And I wanted, and it does come up, women lawyers in particular love to hear her story. And so I'm not saying make up stories about your family. I'm not saying be emotionally impactful just to make up emotional stuff. But I absolutely am leaving you with this story and this, the origin story for a reason. When people know why you do what you do, when they sense that of all the things in life, you are working with them and serving them, and that's what you chose to do, and the online world allows you to reach so many more people than you've ever been able to reach before, when you do that, you are adding an incredibly important dimension to the credibility and your ability to serve more people, and for them to come to you knowing not only what you do, but why you do it. And so that's my final kind of just observation to you. If you want to get hold of me, here is my contact information. I'm very easy to find. With a name like Gideon Grunfeld, you Google me, there's no one else on the planet with my name. I'm easily found on LinkedIn. But it really is truly been a work of a lifetime. I was a lawyer for 10 years. I've been a consultant for 20, approaching 25, to help lawyers elevate their status. And if there is anything we or at Rainmaking for Lawyers can do for you, we'd be delighted to do it. And remember, lawyers dramatically underappreciate what they do. The world would not be as good or the same without us. So please take advantage of these online tools. Please use all the tools that you can to enhance your credibility. It's good for you and it's good for society as a whole. So thank you for your attention, everybody. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to helping you in any way I can.
All right then, good afternoon everyone. My name is Mark Riley. I'm the VP of Web Services here at Practice Made Perfect. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about building your online legal brand, and we're going to provide some useful tips and strategies to do that and develop your online presence as a lawyer. All right then. So, just a little bit of background information about PMP. We've been in the advertising industry helping to support personal injury law firms for approximately 20 years. Our average tenure of our clients is 8 years or more. And we've got approximately 20 people that are working in our office here in beautiful, sunny downtown West Palm Beach, Florida. As an agency, we offer a complete suite of services to help law firms advertise themselves on just about every medium that's currently available in the market. This presentation is going to be focused on the digital aspects. So in that instance, it would include website management, generative search optimization, SEO. We would look at paid search, YouTube, local services ads, paid social media, and things like that. Most importantly, from our perspective, is that we love generating a lot of leads, but we actually index on cases, on signed cases. So that's a sort of hallmark of our service, is that we understand what moves the needle, and that is how we measure ourselves and the efficacy of our services. All right then, so the agenda for this conversation is going to be, we're having a look at why your online brand actually matters. We're going to look at how we can position you to be the expert that your prospects trust, how to reach the right people that are looking for your services, and then we'll do a summary and sort of bringing it all together. All right then, so let's begin. Why your online brand matters. Well, first of all, first impressions actually happen online. They don't happen in your office. And recent data suggests that 76% of people that are searching, they're going online before they decide to make the decision to hire a lawyer. So essentially, they're using online to validate their decision-making process. So having a robust appearance online is critical, very, very important to how you're being perceived in the marketplace. And obviously, we want to position you so that you have a leading edge compared to your competition. An important part of this process to consider is something that we like to call the client user journey. And at PMP, we help all types of law firms, but the core of our practice is built around personal injury, single event plaintiff law throughout North America. So this visualization was based on the logic of an injury victim, but it does apply to many, many other types of practices of law. And so if we look at this graphic, we're thinking of, first thing, the incident happens. And let's say in this instance, it's going to be a car crash. So in single event plaintiff law, we can't make the accident happen. We can only be there after it does. And this logic applies throughout our strategy of how we help position our firms in front of those prospects. And so incident happens. Most people, most of the time, will ask a colleague or a friend, what should I do? They may visit a doctor if they're hurt and they need treatment, and then whilst they're getting that consultation or the treatment, they'll ask the lawyer if, what they should do or how they can help. they may very well most likely go online and just doing an initial search. And we're going to talk about funnels and stuff later on, but very, very introductory. They don't know what to do. Something's happened and they're looking for information. So the internet is obviously a very, very good place to get that information. Beyond that, once they start to refine their decision-making process, okay, this has happened and this is what I think I need to do, they need to decide, first of all, what type of lawyer do I need? They then generally start to question how much does it cost. You may see a lot of local law firms in your area that do personal injury that continually messages the free consultation or there's a free case review. And the reason for that is because people still think it costs something to hire a firm that may be using the contingency fee model. Now, not all of you do, but it's just something to keep in mind that, repeated messaging is very, very important. And then once that they've received the answer to that question in terms of what type of lawyer do I need, and then what is the estimated cost of hiring that person, they sort of go to the next phase where they're looking to decide the qualifications of the person that they're looking to hire. So who's the best person for me? So as they move into this sort of more intention-based decision-making process, they're looking at, starting to find the type of lawyer they like or that they think they need. They're looking at the experience of that lawyer. They'll start to Google search terms that are relevant to their incident and start to read about the lawyers and the law firms. How many years have they been experienced? Have they handled a case like mine? Have they had other customers that they've handled a case on their behalf? So case results, reputation management, reviews, all those things become really, really important. And then beyond that, we actually get into the action cycle, the conversion cycle. So once they've made those decisions, there's a lot of different places that we can make it easy for those prospects to contact you. They may click on an online ad from a Google ad or local services or something like that. They may see an advertisement on television or perhaps on YouTube or streaming a TV show. They may, go to, they may call and they may decide to have a meeting with you in advance or to learn more if you can help them. And ideally, eventually that leads down into the point of contact with that prospect where you get to meet them, or if you're doing DocuSign, you send out the information that you need to sign them up, and then the client selects an attorney and signs a retainer, and then you guys go and do what you do best. So during this point, there's lots and lots and lots of different touch points where we can put you in front of those people. Again, knowing that in most instances, we can't make the accident happen. We can only be there when it does. So that's why recency and repetition is very, very important. All right then, so again, I mentioned earlier on that we've got sort of a funnel that people generally go through as part of their decision-making process. And for the most part, it's really just three components. And there's a broad awareness play, which is at the very top. So again, incidents happen, I don't know what to do. And in terms of law firms, again, branding is very, very important. There will be a lot of searches for people that are looking for a specific service and aren't typing in the name of the firm, but there's, branding is, there are lots more searches for people that are looking for specific businesses. So the way we increase that awareness, or we get into that pool of applicants, is through some of the things you can see on this screen right now. Obviously, TV, broadcast, general visual media is very, very good. You'll notice there's CTV, that stands for connected TV. So think of streaming and all those types of things are in that. Obviously, billboards, radio are a great way of doing it as well. But on the digital piece of it, you'll start to see social media, paid social media specifically, is a great way to get a lot of eyeballs and awareness of who you are, what do you do, where you're located, as is YouTube, and both the paid component and the organic side of things. And then we look at more granular things like blogs and things like that. As people start to move down, again, they sort of know who you are and what you do, and now they know what they need. we get into the consideration phase, and this is where your choice of topics and the things that you have published on your website and on all of those channels begins to matter. Think TikTok, think YouTube, think Instagram. And so basically these are just another little bit more refined messaging where you'll talk about your qualifications, case results, client testimonials, and things like that. Then finally, we get down to that conversion part of it where most people are ready to do something, and commonly the majority of things will go through your website. So if you get on into this presentation, you'll see why that's very, very important to have a very good, high converting and very easy to use website. On the same topic, people may also contact you through a social media ad, and then this presentation will look at Meta because it has the greatest amount of reach. There's options for people to call directly from the ads and contact you through a form directly from the ads. And the same thing applies to paid search. So we'll talk about local services ads where they can contact you directly from the platforms, and pay-per-click where they can do either through your website or directly from the ad. So lots of different places where we can get your messaging in front of those people and to promote your services. All right then, so at P&P we have a very specific vision on this process, and we like to call it our proven process. And what we've done is we approach this with, if I have $1, what is the best way for me to spend that dollar and get the maximum rate of return from that investment? And what we've done is we've broken this into 4 different primary categories. And you'll see on this screen, we've got number 1 is the foundation, and I've been referencing website quite a bit at this point, and there's a reason for that, because all roads lead to your website. And so it's very, very important to have a very easy to use website, a very fast loading website, and something that conveys your experience very, very easily. Many users don't have a lot of time to sit scrolling and waiting for things to load and things like that. So we want to make it easy. And that really comes down to what they call user experience. So having a very, very good website is very, very important. As part of that, you also need to have that website managed. And what that means is to make sure that all of your security certificates are updated, that the software that the website runs is up to date and isn't able to have bugs in it or be hacked, and it's secure. So that comes as part of a hosting plan and on a server. And what a server does is it serves those files to the browser when the browser asks for those specific pages on your website. So that's the first important thing, the most important thing, and it's essentially the fort that you build your moat around, if you will. The next part of this process is what we call local presence and lead generation, and community engagement is very, very important. In this conversation, we're focusing primarily online, and community engagement kind of straddles both, so I'm not going to dip into it a lot. But suffice to say, there's a lot of leverage and mileage that can be gained from doing local community initiatives. Getting out in the community is fantastic. We find that search is at a local level, especially for services types of businesses. So knowing who your local demographic is very, very important. And then knowing who you are is also very important. And community engagement, sponsorships, fun runs, all that type of stuff is a great way to do that. And you can leverage it from your digital side of things by perhaps posting content on your social media channels and profiles, and getting the event coordinators to also mention you. That matters for AI searches. Beyond the community engagement, we start looking at local SEO, and I've got a slide dedicated for that we'll talk to in just a moment, and that's around the Google business universe. That really is the center of the universe for local search. In terms of Google, which gets the overwhelming majority of searches for people that are looking for a services business in their local area. The next component of the local presence and lead gen tier is we're looking at reputation management. This matters very, very much. People like to know that other people have had a good experience with your law firm. forward-facing, very important. Secondary to that is Google also makes it critically important. If you ever look at a Google business listing, and if you can find your own by typing in the name of your law firm and the city you're in, and then most likely it will be on a desktop on the right-hand rail. There'll be, a picture of some of your location, perhaps your front door signage and things like that, hours of operation, and all of those things. In that section, there's a finite amount of real estate. And reviews are one of the most important things that you can see. So Google's very deliberate where they place things. So reviews, very, very important. Reputation management overall is critical. And most importantly, generating new reviews. So this is actually, part of this is offline and again, part online. So I'm not going to index on this very heavily during this conversation. But reputation management, for example, would be asking for a review at the point of disbursement if you're giving them a recovery, a check for a case that you've handled. There's methods that can be automated as part of this process as well, through platforms that send out text messages and emails on a regular determined cadence to remind prior clients that have been happy with your services, if they haven't left a review, to get them to, or to ask them to publish a review. And it's literally just a click from a text message and they'll be in the right place to leave that review. The next component of this is local services ads, and this is where we start getting into some of the paid component, and reputation management reviews really matter for local services visibility. Recency of reviews, in other words, getting reviews in, let's say, 2 a week is a great cadence of 5 stars. Helps to increase the visibility of your local services ads profile. And if you look in a non-branded search in Google, local services ads for a high intention term, so in other words, XYZ lawyer near me, local services ads will be very much at the very top of that page. On a desktop, you'll see 3 listings. On a cell phone, you'll just see 2. And knowing that most people don't like to do a lot of this when they're searching for something, Google has monetized those search results because you have to pay to get that visibility. Interestingly, we see that LSAs generally convert at approximately 20%. So you'll get 10 leads and generate 2 cases out of those leads. On average, every market is a little different, some more, some less. But that's the average. And we tend to find that the acquisition cost, or the total cost per acquisition of a case, is the most cost effective coming from LSAs. So that's why we factor that so early on into our second tier, and it's highly, highly local, knowing that local customers are looking for businesses in their local area. Even though I know many of you use DocuSign, local matters. All right, the third piece of this is an enhanced reach and acceleration for lead generation. This is where we start looking at organic social media content. Think of TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, those types of platforms. Beyond that is then the paid components. In other words, reaching audiences that aren't already a follower of one of your accounts. So it's getting in front of new audiences, and there's a lot of stuff we can click into for that. And then we have traditional pay-per-click. So unlike local services ads where you pay per lead, as the name implies, pay-per-click, you pay per click. So the main difference, aside from the payment type for that visibility, is that there's pay-per-click ads show for a lot more different searches. And all leads don't necessarily come from lawyer near me, so to speak. There's a lot of different searches that people can put into a search engine. And so again, having an ad and leveraging Google's AI and also their machine learning can help to make sure that your ads are positioned in people that have an intention to use your services, but maybe they just don't know quite what that exact search term is. So pay-per-click's a great vehicle for doing that and getting a lot of reach. And then the last component of this before we move on is our market leading sort of brand positioning, which would include traditional mass reach advertising, which is billboards and transit, audio, which is streaming audio, podcasts and things like that, and then obviously radio, and that would be terrestrial and non-terrestrial radio. TV, traditional linear CTV, YouTube, programmatic display, and so on. Beyond that, we look at content and what was traditional SEO. I'm going to touch on what they call AEO now, which is the AI augmented search results and how that's impacting traditional SEO. And then beyond that, we have digital PR, which kind of ties into your reputation management piece and is becoming a little more important in the day of AI, as we're starting to see more of that. But we'll get into that in just a moment. All right then, so how do we position you to be the expert that your prospects trust to reach out to when they need help with a legal question or a potential case? All right then, so where we begin is I'd like to click into generative search because more and more platforms are using AI, and obviously if you've been to Google recently or used ChatGPT, a lot of questions get answered by those generative search engines. So very, very important to keep that in mind. And why that matters in terms of blogging and blog content is that many of those blog topics are now being answered at the sort of awareness top level of the funnel by those generative search results. That doesn't necessarily mean that blogging has no more use. There is definitely a use for it. And the biggest reason for that is because it acts as the foundation of a larger content ecosystem. So if we're looking at posting on social and then we're looking at doing, video platform content and all those different things, anchoring it on a website that you own, keeping in mind you don't own, or maybe some of us don't own Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and so on, you're owning your own piece of content on your own property, which is your website. And again, adding authority and relativeness to the types of business or practices that you practice. Because most commonly, you will blog about topics that you're looking to attract business for. So there's lots of different ways we can enhance that content from the back-end code side of things to be visible for the generative search results. It also anchors your traditional SEO by doing keyword-enriched content and all those types of things. And again, provides an anchor point for your video content. There are great tools available to embed videos in your website and then blog specific, but also using AI translators to then translate and transcribe the entire contents of that video, which you can then add to what is called structured data, which is a code language that AI reads. It was something that all of the major search engines agreed and aligned on to read a number of years ago, but it's something very, very important now for AI and LLMs to read the content on your website. All right then, so moving on, the next part of building trust, we're going to look at video content. And the logic that we use here at PMP for video content, and in this instance, I'm talking organic content, is that you're going to be publishing content on different platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, where there's already a built-in audience for people. There's millions and millions and millions of users every day on these platforms. So there's already a baked-in audience for you to get access to just by posting content on that. I'll give you an example. Think of a work injury law firm that does construction accidents. I don't know if you've ever been to a construction site at lunchtime and what happens, but most of the workers will get their lunch and go somewhere to sit down and jump on their phones. And most of the time, they're going to be on Instagram, they're going to be on TikTok, they're going to be on Facebook, they're going to be on YouTube watching videos. So again, knowing that we want to be everywhere as much as we can and we can't predict when an incident's going to happen, if they see content from you that's engaging and interesting and good to watch, there's a high probability or a likelihood that they may remember you when something happens and they don't know who to call and they haven't got someone that they know. So that brand recognition is very, very important. To augment this just in general for general social media, and this is not partially video content, but also just regular, what we would call static content, where perhaps you've got like a community event that you're at and you wanted to post some photos of it, which is a good thing to do. And then, write a little comment about what you did during that engagement. It helps to humanize your brand, and a lot of people that are looking for lawyers will actually go on social media to look at your profiles and see how engaged you are and what type of engagement you're getting. So being relatable and trustworthy is very, very important, and organic social media is a really, really good way to do that. Before we move on to the next slide, posting consistency is also very, very important. It reinforces your brand presence, and it helps to keep you top of mind. So again, if you've got interesting video content going on, or perhaps you've got a contest giveaway or something that you've got going on your Facebook page or whatever it may be, it helps to signal to prospects that this is what you do, you're engaged in what you do, you love what you do, and that you're reliable, you're approachable, and you're most able to help that person for what they're looking to do. So some interesting, useful ideas to help keep your brand top of mind using omni-channel platforms that you can do yourself. If you have an agency doing this, some of the recommendations we have here, you can pressure test to see if they're doing them for you. But if not, obviously we'd be happy to have a conversation with you about them. That if you're doing it yourself, these are all things that you can be doing, not necessarily having to pay an agency or someone else to do it if you have the bandwidth in your schedule to do that. All right, then I'd like to just talk about briefly, we've talked a little bit about AI and some things. Authorship is something that's very, very important in large language models. And to a degree for traditional SEO, the example that we've got on our screen here is, you'll notice where we've highlighted down the bottom that this is an example of a blog on a website. And on the version on the left, we've got who it was written by, which would be lawyer credentials. And then a short sentence about what that person does, or perhaps some of their capabilities and credibility. There's code that we can add to this that connects into your biography page on your website, that signals to the large language models and also to the search engine bots, again, who you are, what you do, and here's 500 articles that this person has written about or published that all talk about what they're saying their website does, or what their business does on their website. So it adds a lot of credibility. Authorship, as we begin to look at concentric circles, is very important. So think of getting a mention for, if you're, for example, if you're a firm that advertises on television, leveraging some of your local TV connections to perhaps become a subject matter expert on what you do. So if they have a news story and they can contact you for a quote about it or an opinion, that's a great relationship to develop. There may be an opportunity there to have spin-off content. Perhaps they reference you in their social media channels and then mention you in that channel. AI is looking at all of those mentions. Think of this again for press releases or for syndicated content and getting content published on something like Yahoo, for example, or perhaps one of the other main sort of online news networks. Getting a reference in that content that ideally links back to your biography page and your website. It's all of these levels of credibility, and very good websites, or what Google perceives to be a high quality website based on the traffic and content that's published on it, referencing you as being an expert in that on that particular subject. So all of these signals work together, and then you augment that with what you've got on your website. Very easy to use, and all of the metrics that are being monitored for that. You then look at all of your social media posts that you've got going on and all the engagement, and eventually it all portrays you as being what you are, which is a subject matter in the industry you're in the vertical you're in the local market that you're in. So when someone's looking for you, it's most likely that the AI search results may reference you as a source in those generated results, and it may also be where someone is looking to do a keyword search, that if you're getting enough votes or references coming in that you're perceived as very, very authoritative in what you do, that you'll be listed very highly in those search results by Google, because ultimately Google's job is to provide, especially from the organic side of things, is to provide what it believes is the best business to help the person that's entered the question into the search engine. Hopefully that resonates with you, but if it's something that you're not doing on your websites, definitely look at the authorship on your blogs, and then you should be able to programmatically roll that out. People now, I'm going to talk about a few different things, and this is going to be a lot of practical tips that we employ for the firms that we represent, but also looking at some of the tips that you can do yourself, should you not be able to, have an agency or someone else doing it on your behalf. All right then, so let's look at local optimization. This sort of goes into the Google Business ecosystem that I mentioned really early in this piece. So Google Business is really the center of local SEO. I mentioned that there's very specific things that Google publishes and makes available to publish. You need to take advantage of all of those fields where it's practical in your business profile. So the first thing is first of all, you need one. You need to claim the profile. There's a verification process that validates your business is actually in the physical location. These days, it's a calendar event with a Google rep, and you'll need a video, and you need to walk through your premises just to show them that it's real. Second of all, you also need to include information that we call the NAP, which is an acronym for name, address, and phone numbers. So that means there's sections in the profile that you can build out that allow you to list the hours of operation, the services that you offer. You can also publish questions and answers and have prospects or people that may like to ask a question, and there's a platform where you can answer that question through your Google Business profile. You can also publish content on your Google Business profile. For example, say you have a social media post about a community engagement event. That's great content for your Google Business profile because it's a local event that you're doing locally. And obviously, Google Business is about your local location. So if you're in that section of Google Business, there's a 1,500 character limit in terms of what you can publish per post. And it's a great way to add in geographic references and things like that to, again, further cement your business in your local area. Going beyond that, images are also very important. We geotag images here at PMP, which is a way of adding the latitude, longitude into the images. There's not as much weight of that on that strategy in 2025, but it's still somewhat relevant. So if I were recommending do it or don't do it, I would do it because SEO is largely ticking a lot of the right boxes. And it definitely does help to identify where an image is based around. Next, beyond that, I mentioned the acronym NAP, name, address, phone number, and it's very important that any other listings that you have of your business on the internet emulate exactly what that is on your Google Business profile. So there are many, many, many law directories and many, many other local business directories to get your business published in, and they're what we call citations. So these are opportunities for us to publish, again, your name, address, phone number, hours of operation, your website domain, or perhaps a specific page on your website, provided it matches what's on the Google Business profile, posting more images, and all those types of things. So having that be consistent from domain to domain and all these different directories and sites that you're publishing that name, address, phone number on is very important. Local citations, again, is really an augment to what I just mentioned. Some of the high authority ones are the BBB, Chamber of Commerce, sort of to give you an idea of what they are. If you need a list of the top 20, by all means, reach out to me and I'll be happy to get it to you. Some of these are pay to play, others are free. Sometimes when there's errors, the webmasters appreciate being notified that there's errors because they want their websites to be accurate. So there's lots of different ways you can skin it. But again, consistency and synchronization is very, very important. Again, looking at optimizing these Google business profiles, reviews, can't stress it enough. It's real world validation in a digital environment. So very, very important. Ideally, when someone publishes a review, they write in there, thank you for helping me with my XYZ case type in city name. Sometimes that isn't possible for them to do that, and every situation is unique, and I can appreciate that. So a way, obviously we want to get the review first of all, but the way around that is you can respond to the reviews, and you want to be responding very, very promptly, as in ideally less than a day in this instance. And in that response, you can then include the service that you help them with and also the city location that you help them with that in. Keeping in mind, it's tying in all of those themes to your Google Business Profile. When you think of adding 100 of those, all of a sudden your sort of, if you think of it as a word cloud, is very much who you are, what you do, and all this great supporting stuff that's been validated by previous clients. In terms of content, we touched on this as well. Obviously, we want to make sure that we've got relevant blog content that's on your website. And again, we've got that 1,500 character limit in the Google Business Profile. So we want to make sure that, that you're taking condensed versions of that and publishing it. Normally about once a week, once every 2 weeks is fine for Google Business. And then there's something called schema markup or structured data. And this is something that I mentioned before, where AI is actually, this is how, for the most part, or for a large part, AI is actually reading websites now. So having that structured data markup rather, with your name, address, phone number, and so on, embedded in your website, connects everything back to that Google Business Profile. So hopefully this component was helpful for Google Business. But again, it's very, very important that that you get this right. If you have any questions about it, be happy to have another conversation on it, but it is definitely a core pillar of your local business strategy. All right then, so moving on. I'd like to now talk about local services ads and just some takeaways in terms of the value of this platform. Again, it is a pay per lead model. So you only pay for the valid leads when they come through. You don't pay for clicks. The biggest benefit for LSAs is that they're for a high intention search, so someone that knows what they're looking for and is ready to do something now. These will be at the very, very top of those search results for Google. Highly competitive to get visible in these, but there are strategies to ensure that you're getting a very reasonable amount of visibility in this platform. I look at LSAs as being a mirror of the firms that we work with. So having all of these components in line generally means you're doing a good job for your clients. So some of the ranking factors that we've seen are most important in terms of getting visibility in this platform and kickstarting profiles that may not have been performing. Proximity is still really important. They also used to call this radius. They were the 3 R's. Radius, response time, and reviews. But in the interest of this conversation, proximity to the person that's making the search, which most likely will be on their phone. Their location indicators probably automatically tagged on, so Google knows where they are. That's one of the factors that will play into visibility. How quickly you respond to these leads is very, very important. You need to make sure that you've got messaging on. You need to make sure that people are responding and looking at those messages as soon as they come in. And same thing for picking up the phone. Within 2 to 3 rings, someone needs to be talking to someone. It can't go to a call tree or anything like that. Response time really matters. As a side note, I believe that Google actually sells these leads to more than one firm at a time. So that's why I believe response time is very, very important. So As soon as you get the LSA lead, you need to be picking up the phone or answering that message ASAP. Your reviews, again, also really matter. You'll see on the screenshot here, we've got, the rating of the law firm. Doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but it needs to be very high, and there needs to be a lot of them, ideally. If not, you need to be showing a trend that you're working towards building them. Hence, our recommendation of doing the reputation management early on in the piece and building that as part of your core. Setting up that sort of pipeline of reviews is a great way to feed all these different platforms. So yeah, review score and volume and frequency, ideally 2 a week is good. Beyond that, actually, once you've secured the lead, you need to be going into the platforms or having your agency go into the platforms and updating the actual lead itself. There's fields that we can add into the lead that score the lead, and we can also add things like the name of the person, details, and then eventually it unlocks their email address as well. So doing that helps again to validate Google, wherever this search came from, was it a good lead or not? If it is for this particular account and they say, yes, we need to do more to get more of those, and that's what the AI is using. So very important. And then obviously budget is actually something else that does matter. You can't just buy pure visibility in local services ads. All of these other factors also come into play. However, budget is definitely something. So you need to have an idea of what that looks like in your market, and a local agency should be able to give you an idea of what that looks like. I know from our side of things, we're nationwide, so we see some markets it's $175 a lead for personal injury. In other markets, it's almost $500. So it really does depend on the competitiveness in your local market, and it does vary obviously depending on the type of practice that you're involved in. Primary benefits again from the LSA platform is that it's people that are ready to do something now. So again, in the interest of, if you're looking for prospects and you really need to be visible in the LSA platform. All right, then moving on. We've got a few more slides to go before we call it. The next piece I'd like to touch on again is looking at Meta, which encompasses both Facebook and Instagram. The reason why we generally index initially on using Meta ads is because it's got the largest reach, they've got the most amount of users, it's got the most advanced targeting, and this gets very interesting in terms of behavior-based and interest-based behaviors on the platform, whereas Google tends to be intention-based. It's a slight delineation in terms of how they're targeting potential prospects. And also, we can do full funnel coverage in Meta, where we can do awareness campaigns where we teach people basically, who you are and what do you do through short videos and things like that. We can then sort of lead them down further and into the consideration phase, where we start to perhaps show them client testimonials, or perhaps you've got a webinar that you would like to invite someone to or a group of people to. It's a great method to sort of continue that conversation until we finally get to the conversion phase where they're actually doing something. And again, you can either, in those type of ads, we'd look at doing a strong call to action in those ads, knowing that they've gone through these different funnels and we've moved them out of each campaign where they've shown interest, they've continued to show interest, and now it's time, to really ask them how we can help them to do what they'd like us to do. So Meta is a great platform for doing that. Again, there's advanced targeting, and within those platforms, that as they mature the campaigns, they learn more about what your ideal prospect is. And so as we start to refine the campaigns, that targeting gets more and more refined. So your budget goes further because, especially for the conversion and the consideration phases, the amount of the pool of users that we know we want to advertise to is much more focused compared to when we initially began a campaign when the entire account was started. So something that we definitely recommend as part of a coordinated advertising strategy. All right then, so looking at The final component of this, and we've got about 15 minutes to go, we're looking at traditional pay-per-click ads. Takeaways in terms of performance, there's a lot of different ways you can manage your campaign. As of right now, we're seeing an influence of AI in the campaign management side of things. They're steering towards broader-ish campaigns augmented with AI, but we need to be feeding data back in. So in law and in medical as well, a lot of that data needs to be hashed out, so in terms of names and so on, which is what we do. But in terms of time, date, and stamping the leads, and then matching it to, there's a string of characters that associate your campaign leads, and we can pipe that back into the campaign, and Google is able to decipher what that string of characters are to the specific search for that person. And again, we're finding the right people that are clicking through. So provided we're putting that data back in and saying, yes, this was the case, or no, this wasn't the case, and ideally, if there's an indicative value of that case, we can then start to refine the campaign. So we're looking at a total cost per acquisition as per a cost per click or a cost per lead, knowing that we index on cases. So really working on that back end side of things and bringing everything back into the campaigns is very, very important. From the front facing side of things, having sending the traffic to dedicated landing pages is very, very important. We do not send traffic to practice area pages on your website. We have specific built pages that are designed to convert and have been designed around thousands and tens of thousands of visitors that have come through paid search to these landing pages, and just about as many conversions. There are tens of thousands of conversions, where the conversion is a lead, a call, a contact form, or perhaps a live chat. So having that data and then building pages specifically to cater that is very important. Especially, some of the clicks we'll get will be $300 a click. So we need to make everyone matter. Having an optimized landing page, again, that is also really easy to use, and mobile first, and all those different types of things is very important. Obviously, the ad copy itself, if you're looking to manage an ad campaign, you need to write compelling content. There's lots of different options and quality scores in Google. There's something called ad strength, which actually doesn't have a major bearing on the campaign. We have a lot of user testing data and obviously campaign data, so we run our campaign ad copy in quite specific ways. But ultimately, we want to be able to address the query or the search of the user, and then how you can help in the main headline. So, car accident in city name, we've recovered 500 million. We've recovered 1 million. We're 5-star rated. Things like that can be very, very compelling in an ad copy. And generally, when we write those types of headlines, we tend to find that what we call the click-through rate, which is the number of people that have seen the ad compared to how many actually click through from that ad and engage in that ad, significantly increases compared to some of the more broad targeting. Last component on this is also, again, tracking all of those leads and feeding that data back into the campaigns. Now, as we start talking about Performance Max and some of those sort of mass reach paid search vehicles where we're getting in search and display networks and all of that, Google doesn't give us a lot of data for those types of campaigns, so we have to feed as much back in and tell it what good looks like, so we can then leverage AI and machine learning from Google to help your advertising spend go a little further. All right then, so I'm going to bring it all together here. We've got just a couple more minutes to go. Again, looking at it holistically from our perspective here at PMP, the core of everything builds around your website development and having a really, really robust, fast, easy to use, optimized website, secure. Next component of that is on a really, really good server that can deliver server files, files to the browser very, very quickly, easily, that's optimized for the platform that your website's based on. That is what we do at PMP. The next piece of this is community engagement, where again, a lot of it's offline, but we can leverage some of the online components, followed and augmented by your local SEO engagement, which is largely revolving around your Google business profile. That then gets augmented by your reputation management. So that's largely bringing in that pipeline of new reviews that come into your website, or rather into your Google business profile. Then beyond that, we start looking at the paid option, one of the first paid options, which is local services ads, where the bang for the buck is the best of the paid options at the moment. Augmenting by organic social media content, then leveraging paid social media content, and then rounding it out with traditional pay-per-click. So generally within this block is a very robust omni-channel advertising strategy where you're focusing online. And then there's a lot of other things that we can get onto later. But in terms of, I have $1, what is the most effective way to extract the most revenue from that dollar? We believe that this is the most effective way to do that. So I hope this has been an informative presentation. If you have any questions, again, we do this all day, every day, and we've done it for a long time. So we love to have an opportunity to learn and how we can help your business and tailor a marketing solution to suit your specific business and help you grow into the firm that you'd like to be. Thank you so much.
As stated during the beginning of this presentation, the link to initiate the certificate process will be displayed momentarily. MyLawCLE would like to thank you for your participation in today's presentation.